The room was full of lab technicians and professors, so the man hurried to hide from the eyes and ears of strangers. The female voice on the other end was asking if it was true that he had been reprimanded at work and suspended. As he walked down the stairs, he nodded at the question and confirmed with a short, "Uh-huh." A month suspension, everything had already been decided. But even under such conditions, he did not even think about changing jobs. Not because I was patient, in fact, I would have gladly just taken and quit. But I was stopped by money problems. Now he couldn't quit his job because no one but him could pay his parents' debts. But his interlocutor thought differently and suddenly suggested reconsidering the relationship. It was so unexpected and shocking that the man froze for a moment, trying to figure out if he had misheard. Colleagues at work constantly whispered about her, and this time they asked about his misdeed, interfering with his work and creating discomfort. He tried to explain that he had done nothing wrong. He was just maintaining his moral principles, so why would she do something like that? But the girl was serious in her decision and seemed to have no intention of changing it. Finally, it dawned on him that his beloved was really going to leave him. He gritted his teeth, trying to calm down so as not to say too much. Not wanting to believe the cruelty of what was happening, he asked So-yeon to think again. Asked if she understood how hard it was for him now. She was always on his side, at least that's what she said, so what has changed now? The girl tried to explain that even if they were in different departments, they still had an office romance. And now he had a falling out with the director of the research institute, so it would be very difficult for her. All eyes are on her because of this, it's hard. But she also has to understand that the director is far from an angel, but apparently, like the others, he prefers to pretend that he doesn't see anything. So Yeon only confirmed the words of her former lover, breaking some important thread in his soul. I thought we've talked about this a couple of times already. I'll say it one last time. Don't be mad at me. You're not a child anymore, and you're not even 20 years old, so I'm sorry, I'm hanging up, and thank you for everything. On the other end of the line, a long beep was heard, replacing her voice. The girl asked me not to call her anymore. She hung up on me over the phone. It's so stupid and so humiliating. He couldn't believe that she would do this to him at such a difficult moment in his life. The man clutched the phone until it almost cracked, trying to cope with the anger that was building up. But the emotions were stronger. They took over my head, not allowing me to think normally and assess the situation sensibly. He jumped up abruptly, growling something inarticulate into the empty stairwell, letting off steam. The director of the research institute, that idiot Kim Hyun-tak, is to blame for everything. If it weren't for him, everything would have been fine. Everything could have been different. In this world, even if you follow your dream, defend your principles, you will have to pay for everything, but now there is no point in being angry. Why did he have a falling out with Director Kim in the first place? Let's go back in time to 4 days ago, when Ryu Yeonjun was suspended from work and removed from the department. Laboratory. A normal working day? A man was examining biological samples from a new series. Suddenly, the door swings open, revealing a breathless and excited colleague on the threshold. He excitedly informed Dr. Ryu that their company's management had purchased Celicure, a new liver cancer treatment from Celigener. Yongjong flinched and turned his disbelieving gaze to his colleague. The management invested 10 billion won in Celigener to purchase the drug. Even though it is still undergoing clinical trials, it is worth the expense. So now they have to finish it, which was really cool news for those who spent half their lives on such drugs. Senior lab assistant Kim Hyun-seok understood that Celicure was much better than their developments. Eloa, Agen's liver cancer drug, still had side effects like rashes, and the long duration of treatment was still enough to cause problems that Celicure didn't have. In the midst of the conversation, the person in charge of research, Hyun-mi-ju, entered. The men immediately turned towards the sound, preparing to share the good news with their colleague. The girl was also happy with such a gift from fate and management, because now they would be able to move forward from the dead point. Ryu enthusiastically suggested that everyone finish and sell the medicine as soon as it arrived. Everyone had thoughts that the adventurous company Celigener would still be able to create a new medicine, but their company has also achieved good results, even if Celicure will work much better. Ryu was confident that he could complement it better than anyone else. After work, he decided to visit the ossuary, a place for storing skeletal remains and also a cemetery for urns. The buildings were connected to each other in one large corridor with branches in the form of rooms, which people entered to meet with long-dead relatives. In one of these rooms, behind transparent glass, there was a white urn with ashes and a photograph next to it. These were the remains of Ryu's younger sister, Sei. He certainly wanted to share with her everything that happened today, believing that the girl was nearby and could hear everything. Finally, the brother will soon be able to avenge his sister, because the adventurous company created a new medicine, which his company bought. and Yanzhong will completely refine it. Then people will stop dying from cancer, no one will suffer anymore from losing loved ones. Because brother will do everything to make sure that no one else goes through the same hell that he did. The next day, Ryu was unexpectedly called by the director. He tried to find out why the doctor was so eager to see Celicure. The answer was simple. It is better than Iloa, it has no side effects, high clinical cure rate. The director was not satisfied with the answer and asked if the guy had thought about his bad sides. The doctor froze, trying to understand what Kim was talking about. The price for the production of Celicure is quite low. The properties of the medicine are better, there are no side effects, and the period of complete recovery is short. So, what are the bad sides? With Celicure you can be cured in 2 years, with Iloa in 5 years. In any case, the patient will have to choose between these two drugs. What would be better, considering the company's sales? Ryu finally understood what the director was getting at. Iloa was more expensive than Celicure. The period until full recovery was longer. Iloa's sales were higher, but Celicure was more profitable in every sense. Director Kim bought Celicure from the very beginning to get rid of him. So now he ordered the young doctor to stop daydreaming and do as he says, forgetting about Celicure. Everyone else in the company knew this too, because there was no one else as naive as Ryu. Everyone understood that what was needed was profit, not results. After all, science costs money. The monthly salary should be paid from the company's earnings, and reagents for research should be purchased from them. This is not a university but a company. It needs profit, it needs money. Ryu's eyes finally opened, albeit a little late. The man in front of him was not a scientist, he was just a salesman, a director who thought only about income and not about a good goal. Everyone in the cancer drug department knew about it, and no one asked any questions. Scientists who develop cancer drugs themselves pretend not to know how to get rid of the best of them. They are all fake. No one has the same goal as Yeonjun. They only want money, and lots of it. Cheaters, Ryu said quietly, without raising his head, which is why the director did not hear his words. The doctor was overcome with anger and disgust, towards them all, and towards himself. The injustice and contempt made him feel like he was going to vomit and throw up. The director did not understand why his subordinate suddenly fell silent, so he called him again. But the man did not react. His head was filled with completely different thoughts about his elders, whom he trusted so much, whom he respected and followed. The best pharmaceutical company in the world, Agen, turned out to be a fake. Ryu slammed the table in anger, feeling hurt and annoyed that all this time he had been a member of a circus troupe and not a research company. The director did not expect such a turn of events and even jumped back, just as he did not expect that the quiet and modest-looking doctor would suddenly call him a scumbag. The man was disgusted by the thought that this money hunter called himself a scientist. Ryu stood up and silently turned towards the door. The director tried to call out to him, to somehow detain him, but he did not react, continuing to move. Just before the door, he stopped for a second, thinking about how he had wasted so many years. His goal, his research, it was all useless, time wasted. Not resigned to this, he nevertheless decided to simply leave silently, accepting defeat. Enough time has passed since then, but coming to terms with the situation was more difficult than expected. Even alcohol did not help to distract from the gloomy thoughts, neither drowning the bitterness of separation nor the broken hopes of achieving good goals. As time went on, it became increasingly difficult, as the goal that Ryu had strived for and thought he was about to achieve crumbled to dust. A month without work flew by rather quickly. If you think about how exactly the man spent most of it, it becomes sad. He drank heavily and daily, not remembering anything from those days. The disappointment and despair he experienced in the company made him dependent on alcohol. At some point, he felt so bad that he had to see a specialist. After going to the hospital, everything became clear. The diagnosis was disappointing: hepatitis. The doctor strictly warned that if the man continued to drink, he could develop liver cirrhosis, which could eventually lead to death. Ryu left with the thought that it was really time to stop. His life is hard, of course, but not to the point of committing suicide. If he loses his strength, the lives of his parents and sister will go down the drain, and his departed younger sister should no longer be ashamed of her brother. He has to come to his senses and face it all again. Finally, the suspension ended. Ryu was transferred to another department with a slightly strange name, Life Creation. Having thrown open the door, the guy immediately introduced himself from the threshold, clearly unhappy with the fact that he had been shoved into this cesspool of an institute. No one reacted to his appearance in any way, because the only person in the room was sleeping peacefully, leaning back in his office chair. The man sighed, realizing that there was nothing to be gained in this place since the staff was shirking their work. The Life Creation Department, This includes fatty acids, nucleotides, electrolytes, etc. Also the artificial synthesis of living cells with appropriate stimulation, and ultimately the search for forms that create life. This department is superficially oriented. They themselves do not know what they are researching and what the result should be. Ryu noticed a sign that said laboratory and decided to see what was there. The real reason why Agen founded this department was to isolate problematic employees like Yeon-jun. To the doctor's surprise, the laboratory turned out to be extremely clean, although it felt like no one ever came here. Computers stood in neat rows against the wall, and on the table in the middle were microscopes, ready for use. An electrophoresis kit and a Geldoc system seemed to have everything that was needed. Suddenly, he was distracted from studying his surroundings by a noise. Something was bubbling and crackling, as if it was about to explode. The man turned his head, looking for the source of the sound. Finally, he noticed that there was a test tube in the heating block, and it was the one making these sounds because the liquid in it was almost boiling. A heat block is a device that regulates the test substance to a specific temperature. Apparently, a reaction occurred while the object was left unattended. The lab technician was apparently chilling out somewhere. The lid on the flask covering the contents was barely holding on and was about to fly off to conquer space. Realizing that he would have to decide what to do with the test tube later, Ryu grabbed a pair of tweezers, intending to pull it out of the heater. My hands were shaking, which affected my speed and accuracy. And yet, Yongjong finally pulled out the flask, revealing its contents. It was still bubbling and expanding, as if the heating was continuing. Ryu quickly poured the liquid into a glass cup for research. Finally, the reaction began to subside. The substance became lighter, acquiring a pinkish tint. The man sighed with relief. It was all over. There would be no explosion. It was unclear what was in front of him, because it did not resemble any familiar substance. The doctor was indignant that someone could leave the experiment in the thermal block unattended and walk away. He looked at the test tube and stopped at a sticker that had just one word written on it, a name, Rosalind. It was an artificial cell. He became increasingly interested in what he had just saved. Unable to withstand the pressure of his research vein, he decided to take just one look at the cells under a microscope. He placed the bowl on the glass, adjusted the microscope, and turned the fine-tuning knob a couple of times to make the image as clear as possible. A set of cells appeared before him. The mitochondria seemed to be chasing the organelles, sometimes moving towards them, sometimes moving away. But suddenly the cells began to scatter, quickly disappear and die. It appears there was not enough salt to prevent interactions with the environment. Ryu immediately rushed to look for the 10x PBS solution and quickly found it on one of the shelves. I drew a few milliliters into a pipette, trying to be as careful as possible. Adding the solution drop by drop to the substance being studied, he observed the reaction. And she didn't keep us waiting long. The cells did not respond to the environment, remaining the same as they had been a few seconds ago. But just a couple of seconds later, they began to die again, and at an even greater speed. It seemed that the solution first slowed down the reaction and then sped it up many times over. Ryu had made a mistake, spoiling a few milliliters of the sample, but what was wrong remained a mystery. For some reason, the thought crept in that they are similar to this sample. They disintegrate into molecules in the same way and die. He was amazed by the possibility of creating life. Isn't this contrary to all the laws of the universe? And suddenly something unexpected happened. The cup turned out to be chipped, and Yongjong cut himself on it. This is why you should always work with gloves. But in the moment of surprise, there was simply no time for them. Cursing at everything and everyone, he shook his hand, trying to drive away the dull pain in his finger. Although everything in the laboratory was sparkling clean, the equipment itself was in poor condition. The blood did not stop. It bubbled and flowed down my fingers onto my sleeves, staining them scarlet. And then Ryu froze. A frightening thought came to him. Nothing got into the wound, did it? He turned back to the sample he was examining and hurried to the sink to wash away the remains of a possible disaster. Looking up at the mirror, he chuckled at his own frightened expression. And again he shuddered, noticing a strange sensation on his cut finger. The wound was bubbling, and instead of blood, thick white foam had formed. But Ryu simply washed it off, thinking that it was the remains of soap. Having calmed down a little, he returned to the office, not immediately noticing that this time his colleague was not sleeping. The man greeted the newcomer politely, examining him from all sides. Yongjung had to introduce himself again, but this time to the employee who was no longer sleeping. His name was Park Dong-hyun, a senior researcher, and it seemed the only one. They shook hands to introduce themselves, but Ryu was still under the impression of what had happened. "Welcome to exile," the man said with a smile, bringing the man back to reality. He explained that this was the place where all the losers of the company gathered, and he even made a face, surprised that Ryu didn't know about it. Rumors had apparently already spread throughout the entire institute, because Dr. Pak almost immediately recognized him as the one who had recently had a falling out with Director Kim. Dong Hyun confirmed that the whole company was buzzing about the incident, so he was pleasantly surprised that the man still stayed, even though everyone understood his disappointment. It was all about money. The same situation was with Dr. Pak and the other researchers in this department. Finally, the lead researcher remembered the sample left in the thermal block. Ryu winced, once again becoming overwhelmed with worry, but quickly pulled himself together. He replied that he pulled it out of the device and then tried adding 10x PBS. Yeonjong thought that he would be scolded, but Dr. Park only praised the young man, appreciating the highly qualified specialist. He didn't deserve such gratitude in his opinion, so he admitted that all the cells eventually died anyway. And again, no anger. The man just said that the experiment had been failing for 2 days. In any case, the top brass didn't expect anything from this project, so there was no need to worry. The doctor handed Ryu a can of coffee, reminding him that there was an important seminar coming up soon, as there was at the end of every year. The man seemed to have just remembered about it. Each department had to submit some kind of project with an already achieved result. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through my head, echoing as a noise in my ears, making it difficult to think. Yeonjong blinked several times, but nothing went away. On the contrary, the dizziness grew stronger and stronger, and the picture before his eyes began to blur. He looked at Dr. Pak, but all he saw was his blurred face, and his voice was becoming less and less audible. Don Hyun didn't immediately notice that something was wrong with his interlocutor. Ryu's eyes were rapidly growing heavy, and he was no longer able to open them once again. An unfinished can of coffee fell to the floor, splashing its contents around. The man who had been holding her lost consciousness, and she hit the floor tiles with a clang. Dr. Pak tried to bring his colleague back to consciousness, but it was all in vain. He lay motionless on the floor, taking short, slow breaths. He screamed, called for help, asked someone to call an ambulance, but no one heard. A few hours later, an unconscious guy brought from the research institute was brought to the regional hospital. The doctors examined him and left him to rest, finding nothing dangerous to his health and explaining the incident as simple overwork. One of the medical staff came in just in time to check on Ryu. The guy had just opened his eyes. Still not understanding where he was, he looked around the area, meeting the gaze of a man in a white coat. The doctor immediately asked if he had any chronic diseases, but apart from hepatitis diagnosed a couple of days ago, there was nothing like that. Hepatitis can cause anemia, but just in case, Ryu was offered to undergo tests to make sure everything was okay. Ryu didn't answer, trying to piece together his blurry consciousness. His eyes kept trying to roll back, but the guy held on, choosing one point to focus his attention. But the doctor decided that Yeonjong simply didn't hear him and even leaned closer. But the guy was somewhere else. He was confused not by the questions but by what he saw in front of him. A strange, translucent screen with a large inscription, "The creation of life is the kingdom of God." This is what caught his attention and did not allow him to fully come to his senses, but apparently, only he saw this strange something. The doctor was indulgent, having become accustomed to all sorts of nonsense over the years of work, so he calmly clarified what exactly the patient was seeing in front of him. His eyes widened, looking in surprise at the changed text, informing him that artificial cells had been created and Ryu had become the first player in human history. The doctor continued his questioning. He was interested in what was written there, but the guy himself was not sure whether he understood the meaning of this text correctly. The doctor suggested that these could be auditory hallucinations, but the patient did not confirm this theory. Rather visual, it's easier to explain what he saw, it can't all be real. Ryu jumped out of bed, trying to comprehend his situation. Meanwhile, the system notified that the artificial cells had restored his body. In addition to the visual ones, auditory hallucinations were also added, which the guy quickly told about. Something was ringing right in his head, like the sound of an alarm clock, and it occurred every time the text in the translucent window changed. The doctor wrote down everything that was said in the medical record, making some notes at the same time. When asked if there was anything else, Ryu replied that he didn't really understand, but that seemed to be it. He raised his hand, wanting to touch the unknown. His finger touched something that at first glance seemed ephemeral. The screen responded with an unpleasant coldness and flickered. A second later, he disappeared completely, having slammed loudly as if someone had closed a door nearby. The doctor, who had been watching the patient's actions all this time, opened his mouth slightly, trying to understand what was happening and what he should do about it. He promised that Ryu would be discharged today and that tomorrow he would go to neuropsychiatry because with such symptoms it would be better to see a specialist. They decided to book a time right away without going anywhere. After leaving the hospital, Yeonjong noticed something strange. This could not help but shock and arouse suspicion. In his hands was a container with lenses that he definitely did not wear. Then why is everything so clearly visible? Because vision cannot be restored on its own, without a special operation. Also, the back pain is gone and the throbbing pain in my upper abdomen has subsided. And everything is fine with the neck. With all the joints too, the body seems to have become lighter, as if the man had returned to his school years. He was amazed by what he felt and what he did not feel, but to which he was accustomed. It was only towards evening that Ryu reached home, slowly trudging through the city and looking somewhere at his feet. His head was filled with thoughts about everything that had happened in the laboratory and was happening now. It was hard to believe in healing magic or anything like that, but there was no other explanation yet. After taking the prescribed pills, Yeonjong collapsed onto his bed, trying to gather all the available information into a logical chain. The notification alerted the owner that the artificial cells had begun to break down the drugs injected into the body. And a minute later, the message changed to 30 milligrams of prednisolone successfully broken down. Ryu didn't immediately understand what was ringing in his ear, but he immediately flinched when the screen again changed what was written. 400 milligrams of pentoxifylline successfully split. He jumped up, trying to brush away another hallucination, but it was not going to disappear. Instead of continuing to wave his arms, the boy turned his attention to what else was written in the window. The status window and notification. Such inscriptions were burning in the corner of the panel. These buttons seemed to be begging to be pressed, and the guy took the risk. Another alarm clock sounded, and the inscriptions changed. A new window opened, the title of which read, Artificial Cell First Level. Then its metastatic state for all organs, synchronization, cell suitability, and control of gene expression. The man ran his eyes over the inscriptions and the number of questions increased 100 times. What interested him most was the point about synchronization, with 3% activity. He had only seen something like this in fantasy games and even thought that there was a hidden camera installed somewhere, although in fact it looked very realistic, which made it more and more difficult to believe in the deception. The screen beeped again, a new notification appeared, curiosity could no longer be stopped, so Ryu believed his hallucination and decided to play by its rules. Unread notifications have started loading. Congratulations, creator! The artificial cells have been synchronized with your body to increase the level of artificial cells, improve the metastatic state, or the synchronization state, the window announced. As it increases the level of artificial cells, overall physical strength and recovery speed will increase. It seemed like complete nonsense and still didn't explain what happened to Ryu. The man was still trying to comprehend what he had read, but the text had changed. This notification and status window is created by artificial cells that manipulate the brain's neocortex. It was created based on the design you are most familiar with by analyzing memory information from the hippocampus. The status window reminded him of the moment when Ryu was in the life creation department. It finally dawned on the guy that it was all about the substance he pulled out of the heating block. I remembered the moment when I cut myself on the edge of a glass bowl. That's when it all happened, on that fateful day. Yeonjun's blood entered the sample and a reaction occurred. The cells began to respond when they received the missing component. Then this system of artificial cells was activated, beginning to form a living organism from the substance. He turned into an embryo, a real fetus. And so Ryu ended up connected to him, and those 3% synchronization is his blood. At that time, the guy didn't understand anything. Didn't notice anything except the foam at the site of the wound. Artificial cells had already settled in it that day, and were activated a little later. Unbeknownst to him, something foreign had entered his blood and quickly spread throughout his body. Bubbling through the veins, spreading in a sparkling stream, the substance reached the heart, activating new abilities. Ryu jumped away from the notification screen as if it could do something to him. He looked at his hand, which showed no sign of a recent wound. The man took deep, nervous breaths, forcing himself not to panic and trying to think as clearly as possible. The substance reacted with his blood, it evaporated, and then entered the blood vessels through the wound. A new notification popped up asking me to name the artificial cell. He went through the options, one of which was the X-leg, and didn't even immediately notice that the window began to seem to talk to him, becoming more like a person. Ryu assured that this made sense, but the artificial cell completely disagreed. The guy felt like he was being made fun of. He had absolutely no idea what name could be suitable for something that was not particularly alive and could not be explained scientifically. Meanwhile, the system continued to press, asking for a name. Rosalina, Yeonjong breathed out, hoping that at least this would please the notifications. The name that was written on the sample container. A new window confirmed the choice. From now on, Rosalina belongs to the guy forever. Furthermore, the creation of life is an event that can only be performed once. It is worth keeping in mind that even if one tries to create a likeness in the same way, life will not be born. Ryu sat on the bed and stared blankly at the pale blue screen. Either he's going crazy in a very spectacular way, or it's all real. A sharp pain shot through my head. I needed to calm down and think. All phenomena are subject to scientific explanations, and nothing can be an exception. It's all such nonsense. Whether it's an artificial cell or a synchronization, firstly, now is not the time to think about things that don't make sense. If we assume that all of this is real, then it means that because of this, the physical state of Ryu's body changed when he left the hospital. He glanced again at the status window and the state of Rosalina's artificial cell. Liver condition is 46%. She really wasn't in the best condition because of hepatitis. Maybe that's related to that. And then the guy noticed a footnote that he hadn't noticed before. Beginning work on normalizing the body's condition. Inflammation was found in the liver, tissue suppression and restoration begins. Gene expression is launched to create B hepatocytes in large quantities. The system also detected a hernia between the fourth and fifth vertebrae and also began to restore them. Relaxation and restoration of nerves, activation of myocardial cell regeneration, restoration of vision is complete. It was all so surprising, but if you think about it, Ryu can see quite well without the lenses, although this was not the case before. He was interested in the inscription cell power, but the guy couldn't understand what it was. If it is the maximum, then it must be the total amount. Where can we look for it? You can use Rosalind's adaptability to understand life phenomena or control gene expression. A new caption appeared. The next day, Yeonjong finally made it to the hospital, where he was asked to fill out a questionnaire, as it was his first time visiting the psychological assistance department. Even though everything looked realistic, the guy decided to undergo treatment anyway. He still couldn't tell who Rosalind was and what she looked like in his eyes, hoping to find answers here. Approaching the girl at the registration desk, he was about to start filling out the form, but she suddenly turned away. Coughing hard, she hurried away to a table by the wall. There were some medicines there. Apparently, the girl had caught a cold. No one can work properly when they are sick. So the guy said nothing and continued filling out paperwork. Another notification popped up that the synchronization mode allows us to understand molecular biological phenomena. Ryu didn't understand what appeared this time, as was the case with all the previous windows. He could analyze the cold medicine the girl took. The sync mode suggested running it to perform an analysis. The guy, after thinking for a bit and weighing all the pros and cons, finally made his decision. I pressed the right button, and as usual, it responded with a beep. The ability was activated, and it was as if a million discharges ran through my body. But everything also passed quickly, leaving no traces behind. Apart from a slight weakness and shortness of breath, as if the guy had just run a cross-country race. It seems a little strange, but it inspires confidence, albeit a little. In synchronization mode, energy is consumed very quickly, but it becomes possible to see what is happening in the microworld. With the help of angstroms and daltons, this can be observed in picoseconds, and it is also possible to trigger and intuitively understand any molecular biological phenomenon. This medicine is a combination cold medicine made from ibuprofen, one of the antipyretic analgesics, so the temperature will drop soon. Ryu saw the white blood cells tracking the virus that caused the cold as if it were some ordinary movie. When the antipyretic takes effect, the body temperature drops by 1 degree, causing the function of leukocytes to decrease by as much as 28%. Dihydrocodeine phosphate caused bronchodilation, thereby suppressing the cough. It would seem that this is where it all should have ended, but no. Dihydrocodeine is converted into another ingredient, morphine, which is a type of drug. Rosalind notified that the user had used up half of their energy. That's why I asked to exit the synchronization mode, no matter how interesting it was. If morphine is indeed produced, then other people can also take this combination cold medicine. The girl asked if Yeonjong had filled out his form, and he asked for another minute, realizing that he hadn't even started yet. He just forgot about the medical statement because he was angry with Rosalina anyway. It's worth checking later if it's true. Ryu decided to get online and confirm or deny what the artificial cell wrote. Imagine his surprise when the first link was an article about how dihydrocodeine complex, prescribed as a general cold medicine, had become a hot topic for government stability issues. Opening it, the man read the text. It said that those who took such drugs for a long time began to have mental problems, and there were plenty of other side effects. Children in Europe are banned from taking medicines containing codeine, according to research showing that codeine converts to morphine in the body. So everything that was written in that window is true. Just by looking at the cold pills, Ryu could see not only the composition of the drug, but also its effect on the body. Now it was more difficult to deny the obvious. Rosalina is not a hallucination or a psychosis. This is reality, a magical ability obtained in just one morning. While he was thinking, a dark-haired guy quickly entered the door nearby, attracting Ryu's attention. He wondered if he should check everything again. One more time, just to satisfy interest. Sync mode. Want to know more about Cho Hyunbin? That's what his name is. A disease commonly known as schizophrenia, a person suffering from it experiences strong hallucinations. He can commit dangerous and inadequate acts without realizing it. Come to think of it, sync mode has already been used today. Will there be any problems with this? The guy pressed the button anyway and immediately regretted it. My head was filled with strange, creepy voices. Albin eventually defeated Say Me Rule because you acted like an idiot. Oh, 23, 7, 6, 40. No, not behind you. The voices mingled as if trying to shout each other down. One was talking about some kind of killer. The other was shouting about danger. They were talking some kind of incoherent nonsense that could drive even a healthy person crazy. Cat book, shoe sole, time goes by, cat saliva, book, torn book, shoe sole. All these words had no meaning. How did you end up here? You're looking into my head right now, aren't you? How did you end up here? One of the voices suddenly started asking questions, as if it was addressing Yeonjun. It seemed to the guy that from somewhere in the depths of his consciousness, someone was looking straight at him. Rosalina detected danger and urgently exited synchronization mode. Ryu puffed like a cornered animal, trying to get away from what was happening and drive away his panic fear. Every person suffering from schizophrenia has different hallucinations, and if a person develops this disease, he may have extraneous voices in his head. Ryu saw this for only a couple of seconds, but he already caught himself thinking that he was about to go crazy. Rosalina notified the user that he was stressed. His heart rate increased, and since he was a newbie who was dealing with syncing for the first time, she broke the contact. She can forcibly disable the synchronization mode to avoid damage to the psyche, mind, or any of the organs. To resume work, she suggested pressing the sync button again. It would seem that it is worth stopping and not continuing to test yourself and your strength. But Ryu was an explorer to the core, so he could not deviate from the chosen path. He pressed the button again, starting the scan of the object. Once again, my head was filled with strange voices. Their speech became completely incomprehensible. It was simply impossible to make out the words. Like a huge crowd arguing in raised tones, interrupting each other, it was impossible to drown it out or stop it. But this time, Yeonjong was going to go deep inside, to the very end, to find the origins. It was as if he found himself inside a person, and someone else's brain was levitating right before his eyes. On one side of the brain, including part of the temporal lobe, there are neurotransmitters whose excess secretion is temporarily paralyzed or absent as a result of the accident. It's like a power outage in the city center due to overload. This patient is in danger right now, so the guy quickly closed the mode and returned to reality. Just in time, Hyunben slammed his fist on the counter, clenching his teeth until they creaked as he tried to fight off the overwhelming emotions. The girl behind the counter didn't understand his change in mood, so she simply asked if everything was okay. A shrill scream filled the room, and Cho arched his back, clutching his head as if trying to hold on to something inside it. He tore his hair out, rushed from side to side, but the attack did not subside. Ryu winced, realizing that he was right and something needed to be done right now to ensure that no one got hurt. The patient shouted some unrelated words, as if voicing those that were repeated by the voices in his head. His eyes filled with tears. He was so tired of hearing this every day, dreaming only for everything to finally calm down. Adrenaline rushed to my head, making my body move on its own. The girl behind the counter screamed and stepped back, looking at the recently calm guy in confusion. If nothing is done right now, someone could get seriously hurt. But Ryu was never a hero, and he didn't have any special strength that could deal with a rebellious schizophrenic, but there wasn't much choice. Yeonjong grabbed the boy by the shirt, trying to keep his struggling, arm-waving body away from the other people. Cho still managed to escape the hold, knocking the computer monitor off the stand. The receptionist girl seemed to have seen such a picture for the first time, which should not be a rarity in a psychological help center. Still unable to recover from the shock, the boy continued to scream, louder and more piercingly, as if he was experiencing great pain. Ryu tried to persuade him to come to his senses, shouting that he could get hurt, but no one heard him. The patient was very strong. He was helped by the adrenaline in his blood, which is produced during a seizure, so there was no choice but to wait for help. The girl finally came to her senses and ran somewhere deep into the hospital, and Yeonjung stayed with Cho, trying to keep him at least in one place. Accepting specific stimuli for fibrous cells such as mandibular myocardium, humerus, and mitral bone, emergency, transition to vegetative state of physical energy consumption, Rosalind's notification popped up. She detected an excessive release of adrenaline, so she activated Acton, just as hurried footsteps and shouts were heard in one of the corridors. The doctor, the orderly, and the girl from the counter ran to help, but stopped before reaching the patients. A rather strange picture appeared before them. One guy was pressing another guy's face to the floor, sitting on top and twisting his arm. Ryu immediately apologized for apparently going too far, even though he himself had essentially done nothing. But Hyun Ben calmed down and lay under Yeonjung as if he was sleepy. The doctors froze for a few moments, trying to process the information they had received and cope with their emotions. Finally, the doctor came to his senses and hurried to send for a sedative, while the girl at the counter apologized to Ryu and examined him for injuries. Having finally finished with all this bedlam, the guy headed towards home. Although temporary, his motor skills improved, all thanks to Rosalina. He still didn't believe in the system and the artificial cells, even if in the end everything that happened in his head was confirmed from the outside. Maybe he's just schizophrenic and hallucinating like that guy. However, all the anomalies he has experienced so far and the artificial cells in his body prove that Rosalind does indeed exist. Therefore, as a scientist, from now on, he only has to worry about one thing. How can this ability be used? First of all, it's worth leaving the company because there was nothing to gain from it from the start. Rosalind reported a decrease in physical fitness due to repeated synchronization, and also found that the microbes in the creator's body were unbalanced. To restore them, you need to take probiotics. Then it will increase again. There was a pharmacy in this place that Ryu often goes to, so he decided to do as Rosalind said, since physical strength is a useful resource. The girl at the cash register greeted the client and immediately asked how she could help. Ryu asked for probiotics, thinking that he hadn't seen her before since the pharmacy was run by an old lady. The girl said that this was her aunt's pharmacy and that she was currently taking a short vacation. The pharmacist also had some free time, so she agreed to look after the point in her absence. While chatting sweetly with the client, the girl looked for suitable probiotics and settled on one box. It was the best-selling drug company that almost everyone knew about. Ryu peered at her badge, trying to read the name hidden behind her dark hair. Song Ji-hyun. This name was somewhat familiar to Yeonjun, but he couldn't remember why, so he just decided to ask. He asked if the girl worked for a pharmaceutical company, to which he received a positive answer. An interesting guess. In the end, Ryu asked to calculate only this. Just now, the guy read that the pills are from the Rose Company. It was as big as the company he worked for. They had excellent manufacturing process technology and a wide variety of bacteria. The Bifidobacterium lactis in the composition was apparently some kind of bacteria. The girl said that this substance is very useful for the intestines. Yeonjun still had many questions, but he was wondering whether he should ask them to Rosalind, who he could already tire out today. But the artificial cell was not against it, and it itself produced a table of component analysis. He compared what was written with what was on the packaging. Everything matched, which means the company is not hiding anything from its clients. This is already a very good feature. It is worth considering such an opportunity as moving to Rose. And then the guy remembered about the synchronization mode. Is it worth trying it this way? Ryu glanced over his shoulder at Ji-hyun, who was busy with another customer, and decided to give it a try anyway. After activating the mode, many windows appeared at once, surrounding the guy from all sides. There were types of bacteria that are part of probiotics. The guy asked for more information about bifidobacteria, knowing that pharmaceutical companies are currently studying the bacteria that are used to create probiotics. Rosalind gave him information about one of the types of bacteria, bifidobacteria, which was part of the medicine in his hands. After skimming the text, he realized that there was no point in studying this type of bacteria further. Rosalind recommends bacteria that have not been studied by pharmaceutical companies before. In third place on her list was Chlorothonus lamusis. There are still many areas of biology that are still unexplored, and countless scientists are wandering through the sea of knowledge with a poor map. Rosalind's abilities are like a powerful high-resolution satellite with a view of Earth. He returned home when it was already dark outside. Having finished all his business, he returned to what he had thought about in the pharmacy. He placed a piece of paper in front of him and sat down at the table, starting to fill out the resignation form. So Yeon told him not to lose heart until the moment she and Yeonjun broke up. But Eigen is a black company that robs the weak and tramples on research ethics. Ryu had to leave this place as soon as possible to avoid getting stuck in something like this forever. But there was still fear. Where would he go after leaving the company? There is no denying the fact that the status of this company is one of the highest in the country. Other pharmaceutical companies lack experience in research infrastructure. Even if you try to be patient and do something under the flag of your principles, there will be no result. The biggest problem is that no matter how good the drug is, it will not be able to compete with Eigen's products, which are firmly rooted in the domestic market. There had to be a way out. It couldn't be that bad. Ryu walked over to the window to clear his head and look at the city. There are now several foreign companies that can compete with Eigen. But would such an option be reasonable, since there could be people like the director abroad too? People who hide negative data during the research process, including a monopoly on the cost of a single product or even illegal experiments on people. Come to think of it, is Eigen really at the level where he can take down Sally Jenner's firm? It seems there is no honest pharmaceutical company in this world. Starting a small business without any foundation will require a lot of money and time. You will also have to build your business on top of a powerful infrastructure, competing with other companies from the start. It's about achieving huge success, unlocking potential, and launching affiliate programs. Even though Ryu had such a remarkable ace up his sleeve, the reality of this world could become an insurmountable obstacle. He still wasn't entirely sure of Rosalind's abilities and didn't understand her limits. Perhaps even cancer or AIDS could be cured with this system. Even now, many people were suffering from incurable diseases. Yeonjong couldn't help but think about it, just as he couldn't let them suffer any longer, which was why he needed to return to Eigen now. The annual reporting seminar, the company's largest year-end event attended by all of its researchers, was approaching. Here, each department reports on the work it has done for the year in order to continue to exist and receive funding. However, every year the Life Creation Department does not achieve any significant results that are worthy of attention in the opinion of the management. Each time, the department representative left the stage to general laughter and condemnation. Others sincerely did not understand why such a department still existed. In any case, the directors are waiting for only one thing, because everyone understands perfectly well who exactly gets into the creation of life. The voluntary resignation of all researchers is what everyone is waiting for from the unwanted ones, exiled to the failing department. Don Hyun understood this perfectly well, and now, looking at his statement, he thought of only one thing. How will his family react to the latest not-so-good news that his father was not just transferred, but fired? He had mixed feelings about this, but no matter how hard he looked, he couldn't find another way out. He would have to go through this hell again, just like then, a couple of years ago. The cursor was on the yes button, and the computer system asked if the user really wanted to delete everything. Yeonjung returned to work and was finally able to meet the rest of the department's employees, while learning that he was, in fact, a famous doctor recommended by the director himself. The first to introduce herself was a slightly plump girl with a short haircut, who was senior research fellow Jung Hye-rim. She used to be in the protein research and processing team, but for certain reasons she transferred to this department. They bowed to each other in greeting. The line passed to another employee, but he was in no hurry to introduce himself. Dr. Go Soon-yeol informed the senior that there was still a minute left in the lunch break, and he would rather spend it on the phone than getting to know the new guy. He suddenly cried out, "Kohaku, you can't say that, it can't be," which made it seem like he had a split personality. Hye-rim said with a bit of embarrassment and confusion that the break was already over. The doctor immediately put the phone aside because it was time to work, which he apparently took too seriously. He stood up, shook Ryu's hand, and introduced himself normally, adding that he was an ethnic Korean, not Japanese, as his new colleague thought, and that he was currently a Korean citizen. Sun-yeol also quickly lost interest in Yeonjun, switching to Dr. Jong, because lunch was over, according to her, which meant it was time to go to the meeting. Do people like him really exist in the real world? Then, Don Hyun came up from somewhere behind, saying that there were two more people in the department. Department head Jeon Ji-myung and researcher Bae Seon-mi, who are currently in Cheonan on business. When they return, the whole team will be assembled, but in the meantime, it's time to start preparing for the seminar. Especially for Ryu, the senior researcher decided to repeat the information known to the others. Their department is engaged in the synthesis of living artificial cells. They are working on a project to grow artificial organs. The department's goal is not only to grow ideal organs, but also to ensure that they can take root in patients' bodies. Such guidelines were clear. The need for the correct selection of organs is confirmed by historical practice. In 1936, A kidney transplant operation was performed in Russia. After some time, the patient died due to an inflammatory reaction. This happened because the genes of the patient and the donor kidney did not match. At that time, the transplant itself was a real breakthrough, more like an experiment, although it ultimately failed. At that time, people did not yet know that the human immune system perceives the genes of another person as a danger. When creating artificial organs, there are some challenges in designing them to match the patient's genes. Ryu raised his hand, asking if it was necessary to start creating artificial cells before starting to create artificial organs. Dong-hyun was a little surprised by the question, but still answered that it was necessary. Embryonic stem cell technology could be used, but even though it exists, commercialization is not currently possible. But the reason for this was unclear to Yeonjong. It turned out to be quite simple. The patient's genetic material is placed into a fertilized egg, made by combining the sperm of the embryo's stem cells with the egg. Since the patient's genes are used to create the organs, the body will not reject the new artificial organ. But this is just in words. The most difficult thing in the profession of a researcher is that in companies everything is very strict and the implementation of the idea will cost a lot of money. This is why organ transplantation using embryonic stem cells is still at the level of science fiction. Even if something like this could be done in theory, and even if something like this is implemented in practice, no one will allow such an expensive thing to be launched into large-scale consumption. But there is one more snag. Even if it were not difficult and not so expensive, the minus remains. If you can't find a fertile woman willing to donate her eggs, there's no point in even trying. A notification appeared in front of Ryu, asking him to enable synchronization in order to find out how normal cells could be converted into embryonic stem cells. The use will cost physical strength, this time just 2 units, without being calculated in seconds. If the transformation is indeed possible, it turns out that all the problems that were previously voiced and that were preventing the department from moving forward can be solved at once. Ryu raised his hand, wanting to propose Rosalina's idea to help his colleagues in their research, and himself at the same time. But first, he asked, is there a way to transform normal cells, such as skin tissue or oral epithelial cells, into embryonic ones? Dong-hyun thought deeply, a thought that had never even occurred to him before. But Yeonjong was right in his assumption if it was really possible. This would revolutionize organ transplantation. But if this is still impossible, then medicine in this regard will freeze in place, as will the life creation department. Ryu kept hesitating. He was almost sure that Rosalind had a solution to this problem. But how to present everything so that they would believe him in words? How to convince others that he was right? Dr. Jong caught everyone's attention, deciding to interject her opinion into the conversation. If everything works out, the Nobel Committee will come to Yeonjun and say, "Doctor, you have won the Nobel Prize in Medicine." If, of course, all the members of the department had enough skills for this. Don-hyun asked if Ryu had any new technologies or research results, to which the guy answered negatively, because apart from Rosalind's theory, he had absolutely nothing else. Sun Yol caught his attention by loudly slamming a soda can on the table. He thought the new guy's words were absurd. After all, once cells divide, they can no longer return back. Even in most RPG games, having distributed talent points, they cannot be changed. The same is with human cells. The guy decided to remain silent since he had nothing to say in response for now. Dr. Pak decided to end this conversation and suggested focusing on the synthesis of artificial cells, starting to talk about one experiment. Meanwhile, Ryu turned to Rosalind. He didn't know much, since this topic was not his original specialization. The notification window was still flashing enticingly before his eyes, as if asking him to accept the offer and study the information on cell transformation. He believed that Rosalind could not be wrong because it was probably an innovative method that had not yet been discovered in this world. If this technology is effective, there will be no need to fertilize an egg by collecting biological material. It will be possible to take the skin of a patient who needs a heart transplant and use it to create a heart. Since these are the patient's own cells, rejection of the new organ will be impossible. Ryu began to read the text more carefully, trying not to miss a single detail. And just as he was about to move on to the next page, the screen flashed and went dark, notifying him that his physical strength had run out. As Rosalind's level increases, the recovery speed of physical strength will increase. To increase the level, improve the transition state, or synchronization mode, the system prompted. Yeonjong couldn't help but be upset by this news, which didn't go unnoticed. He didn't know what to do to improve these very indicators. He thought about it for a long time until he began to listen to the conversation of his colleagues. There was some talk about the final test of 487. where the cell membrane failed to stabilize and was eventually destroyed. Ryu felt like he had seen these numbers somewhere before, and then he remembered the flask with Rosalind with exactly the same values. He tried to remember what he had done then, every detail, everything he might have missed. At that time, Rosalind was a chemical mass, showing no signs of life, but as soon as this liquid got into the blood, everything changed. Perhaps it was the ATP in the human cell. Perhaps it was the universal source of energy for all biochemical processes occurring in living systems that influenced the birth of Rosalind. It turns out that something can be done from this. Others don't know this information, so now the guy is in a very advantageous position. Even if he now tells about his guess and everything that happened to him that day, no one will believe him, and they won't just test the theory. If ATP is indeed the cause, what should be done? Since this department deals with artificial cells, ATP should be readily available in the lab. The only problem is how to inject it into Rosalind, although this sounds like complete nonsense. But is the only way to revive her is to inject ATP into her body? If Ryu's guess is correct, it would be possible to gain a huge amount of physical strength, which could have a significant impact on many things. Yongjun could become an authority on organ transplant technology. But does he need this? Because his original goal was completely different, far from the one that now flashed through his head. There wasn't much time left to just stand around and rely on others. With only 2 weeks left until the final seminar, will Yeonjun be able to achieve anything in this area? In any case, there is nothing that he is 100% sure of, but now is the time to try to challenge. When Dong Hyun was about to announce the end of the meeting, moving on to the results of the conversation, the guy decided to ask something. Will it be possible to study the connection of stem cells after their separation in your free time? Sun Yol reminded him that it was absolutely impossible but was ignored. Ryu glanced at his colleague and turned his gaze to his boss, waiting for his decision. Hya-rim butted in, saying that since he was a newbie, he could be allowed to do whatever he wanted. But in the end, she didn't mind, because she thought that Yeonjun had some thoughts on the matter since he was always talking about it. Dong Hyun clearly weighed the pros and cons but ultimately gave in. In any case, Ryu had been working in a different specialty all this time, and his transfer to the department was sudden, so it will take time to adapt to the new place. He let the guy do whatever he wanted for 2 weeks. An hour later, Yeonjong was already in the laboratory. He walked around several work tables and headed straight for the cabinets containing drugs and ingredients. After rummaging around there for a couple of minutes, I finally found what I was looking for. A whole bottle of adenosine triphosphate. Not very big, but more is probably not needed. Just 1 milliliter needs to be filtered and sterilized through a filter 22/100ths of a micrometer thick. Then place it in a syringe and that's it. The preparations are complete, you can try to inject. The guy rolled up his sleeve, not without apprehension, determining the location of the veins by eye. He still couldn't believe that he had lived to see the moment when he was conducting clinical trials on himself. After all, no one would believe in Rosalind's existence, so this was the only solution. In any case, this ability is clearly harmless to the human body, so it is worth trying. My arm tingled a little from the injection, but it was worth it. Rosalind absorbed the ATP, so Ryu's theory was confirmed, and this was exactly what was needed. The cells of physical strength temporarily increased. But it's a pity that not forever, which means that something was still wrong. Within 21 hours, physical strength will be increased, but only by 6/10. It's a pity, but in any case, the value of physical strength has already exceeded the number 2. So it's worth hurrying up with studying the material that Rosalind has prepared. Convert normal cells into embryonic stem cells. Physical strength consumption is 2 out of 10. The guy finally confirmed the request. By manipulating a few genes in a normal cell, it is possible to convert them to an embryonic stem cell state, and Rosalind recommends 4 sets of genes as the easiest to use: SOX2, CMYC, OCT4, and KTF4. 4-way exploitation of the above genes in the cell will help to achieve their transformation into embryonic stem cells. The guy jumped up from his seat, not believing what he had read, and the fact that everything was so simple and so complicated at the same time. It's just incredible to learn about such a discovery not through years of experimentation, but just by reading about it. It was like a revelation from God, who would have thought that out of 2,000 genes, these were the 4 that needed to be manipulated. Now that Yeonjong knows how everything works, it's time to get the ingredients for the experiment. SOX2, CMYC, OCT4, and KTF4. I think these are the genes. It was necessary to order them as soon as possible in order to start work and have time to get the result by the annual seminar. Rosalind recommended injecting HEK293 human embryonic kidney cells. The introduction is done using a retrovirus. After 3 days, it is incubated in the same way as embryonic stem cells. Thus, during this time, the transformation reaction will take place. And in the end, what is needed will be obtained. But you will have to wait. Ryu finally finished preparing and stretched. Loosening his stiff back, all that was left was to wait. A few days later, Don Hyun walked into the lab and immediately noticed the sample in the glass bowl. Yang Jong said that this was the stem cell sample he had obtained. The boss couldn't believe what he heard and saw. But the substance growing in the petri dish spoke for itself. The guy promised his colleagues to share a detailed description of the experimental process by mail, and although they did not have high hopes for this, they still agreed, hoping that everything would work out. Ryu changed the subject, suggesting that everyone go eat, since it was already lunchtime. The dining room was noisy as always. Work, research, and some completely abstract topics were discussed at each table. Some walked around the tables with food, choosing what to eat today. Others, almost without thinking, took the first thing they came across and walked to a single table, not wanting to stand out or delay others. On the tables, as always, there was a wide variety of appetizers and main courses, from chicken in a spicy tomato sauce to the usual omelet and rice. Dr. Jong asked Sun-yeol why he didn't take the chicken, but the man couldn't pass by her and had already eaten it before reaching the table. It was a little strange, but it described Go as a person very well. He decided that he couldn't live without meat and went for a new portion. Hai Rim smiled at the corners of her lips, because that's what he always did when his favorite food was cooked. Apparently, they had all gotten used to his quirks. But just as Ryu was thinking this, a crash was heard. He flinched, dropping his food and quickly turning around at the sound of the woman's disgruntled cries. People have already begun to gather around what happened. Ryu didn't understand what was happening until he began to hear words through the hum of the audience's whispers. Sun-yeol had somehow managed to bump into a passing girl and stain her clothes. So now she was screaming furiously, trying to figure out where the unknown person was looking when he walked. She read the name of the department on Dr. Go's badge and snorted with displeasure and contempt. "It's simply unthinkable that I had to run into one of the most wretched departments," she almost screamed, as if she wanted everyone to hear her words. What actually happened at that moment? A satisfied Sun-yeol walked back to the table with his tray, not noticing the girl passing by. He only slightly brushed her shoulder, but it was enough for her to tip her own tray over onto herself. The meat sauce splashed happily onto the white shirt and was absorbed into it almost immediately. The man hastened to apologize, although he was not particularly to blame, but the girl could no longer be stopped. She was in the mood for a fight because her clothes were irreparably damaged. You won't even be able to wash it out because the soy sauce will only spread the stain. The rest of the Life Creation Department researchers watched what was happening with horror, wondering what they could do in such a situation. Sun-yeol introduced himself, trying to somehow resolve the conflict. The girl, like everyone else, thought that his department was filled with idiots. The man tried to clarify the situation by saying that he was actually first in line, and she tried to push her way forward, but then another person appeared. This girl's boss, like a silent rock, towered over everyone else, inspiring fear and respect with just his appearance. The head of the Healthy Products Department, Choi Myung-jun, silently listened to everything his junior colleague was telling him, not really getting into the conflict. It seemed like he didn't care at all what had just happened. It was just an opportunity to show his power. Ryu muttered something under his breath about how it was time to step in and help, but the rest of the colleagues had already rushed forward, pushing their way through the crowd. Mengjun sighed heavily, asking no one in particular why the Life Creation Department was always involved in such things. "I can already imagine what will happen at the final seminar, since you can't concentrate on just walking." His words did not fit with the truth of what had happened. He asked how Sun-yeol was going to make up for her mistake, since even if she washed it, she would hardly be able to wear the shirt again after such a stain. He offered to buy a new one, but even this arrangement did not suit the girl, since she still needs something to wear. Just then, Hai-rin and Dong-hyun arrived to help, which made it even easier for Dr. Go to breathe. They easily made their way through the crowd, which itself parted at the sight of the department's researchers, as if they were lepers. Sun-yeol tried to keep a neutral expression, but he himself was already starting to get angry. The girl immediately turned around to look at those who had approached, immediately realizing that they were also from the Life Creation Department. The researchers agreed with her suggestion. "It seems like piles of feces always stick together no matter how you look at it. It's immediately clear that you're all from the same department." The girl switched to insults, unable to withstand the flow of her own emotions and feeling her impunity due to the presence of her boss. Dr. Jong became increasingly furious. But Dong-hyun held her back and said that the girl should apologize for such statements. But she did not even think about apologizing, explaining that the employee of their department was to blame for everything. And now, not only can't you cope with your work, you'll screw up the final seminar again, like last year. Don't you understand that you're putting the reputation of the entire company at risk? She persisted. In her opinion, they screwed up in everything, from their clothes to the mood of the people around them. Dong-hyun suggested not arguing in vain, but looking at the recordings from the surveillance cameras. It was necessary to find out who was really right. Dr. Jung noticed that the girl was wearing a miniskirt, which is a violation of laboratory rules. She had nothing to say in response to this, so she fell silent, clenching her teeth in irritation. Chief Choi intervened, saying that he was the one who gave her permission to dress like that. In any case, everyone is currently preparing for the seminar and is not particularly involved in laboratory research. Moreover, Miss Yeonju has already exceeded this year's goals, and she submitted a report on her work and experiments last week. Unlike some, she is a very valuable and capable employee. And besides, Myung-jun sarcastically reminded that the Life Creation Department does not have time to look through the camera footage and look for the culprit. They need to prepare for a seminar that is sure to fail. They don't want to screw up like they did last year, and the year before, and every year. They had to save their time and focus on experiments and preparing materials. Ryu couldn't stand still any longer, angry at how unpunished these people felt. He was angry at the way the company was structured, and that good specialists were being sent into exile simply because someone didn't like them. Sun Yol decided to intervene, drawing all the attention to himself. He bowed, apologizing for what he had done and fully admitting his guilt, promising to definitely buy clothes. But he shuddered when a calm voice from somewhere in the crowd said that this was not necessary. Both departments shuddered, sensing the danger in the speaker's voice. They turned towards the source of the sound, expecting an explanation. Ryu appeared out of nowhere, saying that the health food department should apologize. He introduced himself, saying that he had only joined the department last week. He was immediately recognized. Rumors that Yeon-jong had quarreled with the department director had been circulating around the institute for a long time. Ryu did not argue, assuring that he had insulted the director of the research laboratory and nothing happened to him for it. So there was no doubt that he could do something similar again. Chief Choi took this as a threat, assuming that the guy might even start swinging his fists. Yeon-jong assured that he would not do this. But there was one thing he still could not understand. They were asked to watch the camera footage and see who was to blame. But for some reason, the health food department refused to do this, citing the fact that they had no time to deal with such nonsense, because of the experiments which, according to them, have already ended. So what was the real problem? Chief Choi was already beside himself. How dare someone like this guy interfere in his affairs and question his authority? He realized that the Life Department had something to present at the upcoming seminar, and Ryu did not argue. The rest of the department was shocked by this news. They were shocked that Yeon-jong used lies as an argument in the dispute. In the guy's opinion, healthy products are not that far removed from the creation of life. After all, their products are only good for taking a photo of, playing with, and throwing away. There is only one thing left to do: wait for the seminar to decide there who is right, who is wrong, and which department has better research. All this time, a CCTV camera was pointed directly at them, and on the other side of it, someone was watching the concert. Ryu returned to the lab. Of course, it was not advisable to simply remain inactive when the reserve of physical strength was full. However, it was replenished automatically after some time. He planned to personally develop a cure over the weekend, a drug that will be created by him without the intervention of the Eigen company. He asked Rosalind to tell him about a treatment for liver cancer, but the system informed him that physical strength was not enough for this because liver cancer is a serious disease, so it would not be possible to conduct the analysis in one go. It was the same story with lung cancer. The severity of the disease was the same, so there was also not enough physical strength for it. In vain did he aim to create a cure for cancer. So far, he lacks both the knowledge and the resources to do so. It would be good to level up Rosalind. As if hearing the owner's thoughts, the system issued a notification that vitamins B6 and zinc were needed to increase the level. He immediately hurried to the pharmacy near his house. The girl at the checkout immediately recognized him. Ryu had bought probiotics a week ago. The guy thanked Ji-hyun for recommending this particular drug to him. Today, he needed complex nutritional supplements containing vitamin B6 and zinc. The girl began to rummage through the shelves in search of the necessary medicine. She also remembered what Ryu asked about last time, about bifidobacteria. She asked the company's employees. The research results were not quite in line with reality. The girl asked if the guy worked in the medical field. It was just that last time she thought he was familiar with the Rose Company, to which the guy only said that he really did work for a pharmaceutical company and was currently doing stem cell research. But stem cells and bacteria are completely different areas, so why was he interested in the latter? The guy didn't answer, immediately eating one of the pills. The replenishment of vitamin B and zinc was completed. The synchronization speed increased by 1%. The level of Rosalind increased. The physical strength of the cells also increased. The absorption of vitamin in good quality occurred. The physical strength of the cells was further increased. The physical strength had increased much more than he expected, so he became interested in whose product it was. Dongwon Pharmaceutical Company. Ryu asked if they had Agen's drugs. There was one drug that sold more than the others. Its composition is almost identical to the composition of Benefit Alpha. But the products of the company Eigen are twice as expensive. She asked if Yeonjun wanted to buy Power Nature as well. He nodded negatively, saying that he didn't like the company and was surprised that it didn't initially offer Agen, but gave him another drug. She said that she also doesn't like this company. In this they are similar. Ryu was surprised. Isn't the high price in the pharmacist's favor? She paused, thinking about the answer, or rather, how to formulate it. It turned out that the girl had bad memories associated with this company. They often do bad things, this statement struck Ryu. He couldn't believe his ears. Could she have found out something that he had? One day they stole a drug from a small company that was in the development stage. They released their drug at the same time, wiping out that small company. Yeonjong shuddered as he suddenly realized what he had done. When he worked in the department developing anti-tumor drugs, he personally gave a presentation about the drug Celicure. The effectiveness of Eigen's Aloa was much higher than Celine Jenner's Celicure, and as a result, the director of the research institute, Kim Hyun-taek, decided to withdraw the drug from sale. Ryu felt guilty because he trusted the Eigen company like a fool. Just as he decided to ask something, the door behind him rang. The glass slid aside, letting in a new client. An old man with a cane slowly hobbled into the pharmacy, coughing loudly. He didn't cover himself at all, spraying drool all over the place. Yeonjong and Ji-het immediately turned to look at the person who entered. After another sneeze, saliva splashed in an almost continuous stream onto the tiles, and Rosalind issued a warning about the danger. Ryu had an unbearable headache, preventing him from thinking or even standing still. He closed his eyes, trying to bring himself into relative order. My head was spinning more and more, and a buzzing noise settled in my ears, drowning out the voices. Suddenly, the picture began to blur and darken, as if Ryu was losing his sight. The pharmacist girl greeted the visitor with a smile and disappeared behind a cloudy veil that covered the pupil. This sent Ryu into a state of panic, because just a couple of seconds ago everything was fine. The guy doesn't understand what's happening and why his vision has deteriorated so suddenly. He is absolutely certain that he was standing calmly in this drugstore, and his eyes were open and functioning normally. But now it feels as if the world around him has been covered with a white veil. Any sound, even a quiet one, rings like an alarm in his head, causing severe discomfort. The ringing in his ears prevents him from hearing what is happening normally, and people's voices sound like a crumpled sheet of paper. As if all this weren't enough, Ryu's pupils suddenly dilate and his body begins to tremble. Right in front of him, he begins to see clear and bright silhouettes of the flu virus. Rosalind reports that the influenza A virus has been detected. Ryu tries to focus his vision and see if what he sees is true. The silhouettes in front of him become increasingly clear. The boy screams loudly from an attack of unbearable headache, leaning forward and covering his face with his hands. The female pharmacist and the sick visitor turn towards him in surprise. Ryu slowly removes his hands from his face and tries to catch his breath. He is still deeply amazed by what he was able to see. The guy never thought he would be able to see the flu virus with the naked eye, and so clearly. Ji-het asks worriedly if everything is okay, and Ryu rushes to reassure her. The guy apologizes for scaring her and refers to the fact that sometimes he has very strong sudden migraine attacks. After this, Ryu asks where the toilet is, and the pharmacist sends him to the second floor. As he was leaving the door, he heard the girl continuing her dialogue with the customer. An old man with a cane asks to sell him the cheapest and most effective antipyretic. On the way to the restroom, Ryu reflects on what he saw. The size of the flu virus is 1/2000th the thickness of a hair. These are particles that are much smaller in size than a speck of dust. Perhaps the ability to see such small things is also one of Rosalind's skills. The guy notices that his physical strength has decreased, and this is independent of him. Apparently, when Rosalind was exposed to the flu virus, her defense mechanism was activated. Memories of his recent shame flashed before Ryu's eyes. To his shame, he could not control his reactions at the time and gave free rein to his emotions. And now the guy doesn't know how he'll look the pharmacist girl in the eyes after what he did in the drugstore. He really regrets that he can't turn back time. The only good thing is that today he was lucky enough to learn something new again. I wonder what the limits of Rosalind's abilities are. After taking a short rest and collecting his thoughts, Ryu is about to head back to the first floor. He opens the door and immediately comes under the close attention of the pharmacist. The worried girl offers him a glass of water to come to his senses. Politely thanking her for her concern, Ryu takes a few sips. Having returned the glass, the guy asks if the old man has the flu, and the pharmacist confirms his guess. She is worried if the guy is okay, because the visitor was coughing right next to him. The girl sold the old man an antihistamine and a cough medicine because it was too late to take medicine for the flu itself. Most flu medications are now only effective if taken within 48 hours of infection. Now Ryu understands a little more. Although he studied the results of many different experiments and mechanisms, it did not give him the knowledge he needed. As a biologist, he knows almost nothing about the properties of the various synthetic drugs sold today. The guy laughs a little sheepishly, admitting that he doesn't know much about this area. He works as a biologist in the field of cancer research, but still cannot believe in the bright future ahead. Ji-het replies that the reason is that the country lacks an innovative genius who could solve the frustrating problems of the market. This is what the chief scientist of the company where the girl works often says. An innovative genius, Ryu ponders. The pharmacist continues to discuss the meaning of producing flu vaccines. She is convinced that viruses are evolving more and more powerfully every year, making all previous vaccines useless. The girl hopes that with the advent of a brilliant biologist, the very idea of a vaccine will change. Maybe he will be able to create a remedy that will completely eliminate the flu in some innovative way that is beyond the human imagination. Her words give the guy an idea. Maybe we should try studying influenza with Rosalind. Suddenly, the girl asks Ryu an unpleasant question, wanting to know what company he currently works for. She herself works for Celine Jenner's company, which was quite expected. This is the same company that had the incident with Aegon, which involved a drug against liver cancer. Ji-het says that she and her colleagues worked long nights and put in a lot of effort to develop this drug. But in the end, this drug was simply wiped off the face of the earth, which left the researchers in terrible shock. They even had to take vacations to cope with this shock. After finishing the story, the girl asks again about Ryu's company. The guy mentally panics, because it was his report that destroyed the drug that Ji-het had worked so hard on. Luckily for him, new customers enter the pharmacy, giving him the opportunity not to answer the question asked. People are talking among themselves, surprised by the new pharmacist. Recently, an older woman worked here, but now a young, beautiful girl works here. There are so many visitors that the noise of their voices merges into a loud hum, disturbing the usual silence of the pharmacy. Just a minute, get in line and I'll serve you all. Ji-het shouts loudly so that everyone can hear her. The elderly aunts immediately start asking one after another whether such a beauty has a boyfriend, and whether she would like to meet their sons and nephews. Ryu decides not to interfere and heads towards the exit of the pharmacy. He goes outside and walks slowly towards the house. Having arrived, he settles comfortably into a chair and looks thoughtfully out the window. There are so many people in the world who often get sick with common diseases, such as the flu. However, treatment options are extremely limited. Will Ryu be able to create a drug that is much better than conventional modern drugs? The boy rises decisively from his chair and asks Rosalind to give him information about the treatment for type A influenza, to which the artificial cell replies that it can offer him 3 options. Research the mechanism of influenza infection, which will require the expenditure of physical force of 0.05 per second. Study the flu cure, physical strength consumption, 0.9. And finally, learn a way to destroy type A influenza, which will require the expenditure of 1.5 physical strength. The last option makes the guy scream in shock. Is it really possible to completely eradicate the flu virus? Ryu sits back down in his chair and tries to calm his racing heart. It's just incredible that such a possibility exists. But for some reason, the guy feels that he can't handle the third option with his abilities. The first option can be easily found on the internet, so Ryu immediately rejects it. Maybe he should try the second method? This would be the most logical thing. But the possibility of completely destroying the flu virus does not give the guy any peace. Therefore, having given in to his interest, the biologist nevertheless chooses the third option. Rosalind is looking for a way based on her master's abilities. After some time, she suggests destroying type A influenza with swine flu. Artificial Cell recommends synthesizing swine flu based on rhinovirus. Rhinovirus is the pathogen that causes the common cold, and its toxicity is much lower than that of the flu virus. Rosalind proposes to create a pathogen that is as toxic as the common cold and as infectious as swine flu, and release it into densely populated areas around the world. Infected people will not be susceptible to the flu virus, and it will eventually disappear for at least 6 months. Rosalind immediately offers to work out a detailed plan of action to carry out this option, which makes Ryu incredibly angry. The guy thinks that this is just madness. The artificial cell offers not a cure, but a mass infection. To his indignation, Rosalind responds that rhinovirus is a common cold virus, and the risk of contracting the aforementioned swine flu is extremely low. The guy recoils in fear from the pop-up window, because the artificial cell could not respond so consciously before. Rosalind informs that she has reached the second level, and short conversations are possible in variants that require the expenditure of physical strength from one or more. "Can you talk to me?" the guy asks tensely. Today has brought him quite a lot of stress, so he opens the refrigerator door to get a can of soda and relax a little. Ryu pulls the tab and the can opens with a loud hiss. He takes a few sips, still thinking about the option Rosalind is offering him. And yet, the guy decides that he doesn't like the idea of an artificial cell. No matter how low the toxicity level of rhinovirus is, there will definitely be deaths among people with weak immune systems. Rosalind continues to insist that even this would be far less than the number of people who have died from flu over the past 3 years, and thus the break-even point could easily be passed. Ryu becomes even more angry, outraged by the way the thinking circuit of this crazy device is constructed. The artificial cell believes that the option it proposes is the most economical, albeit risky, way to get rid of seasonal flu forever. She has been watching the process of creating her master's embryonic stem cells and is very surprised that he would use Rosalind's power for such a trivial thing. Ryu is first and foremost a player in life, not a researcher at a pharmaceutical company. If you imagine that he is in the game and holding a rifle in his hands, then Ryu has caught an enemy that needs to be killed and is trying to hit him with the butt. While aiming and pulling the trigger is much easier, the guy decides to ask if there is a much easier way to create stem cells. Rosalind replies that her level is too low to conduct an analysis of complex life phenomena. She can only provide data within the limits of her remaining physical strength. Therefore, she recommends that her master increase his level of vitality. Ryu clutches his head in frustration. Once again, at an important moment, he lacks information. Rosalind believes that since the guy is the first and only player in life on Earth, he must be responsible with the power given to him and act judiciously. Ryu looks down, thinking about her words. He closes his eyes tiredly, collecting his thoughts and making a decision. No matter what anyone says, the guy would never do something crazy like spread a virus. And no matter how good the intentions, he's not going to commit some kind of bioterrorism. Without strength, he falls back onto the bed and throws his arms out to the sides, sighing exhaustedly. After his physical strength diminished, Ryu chose the second option and gained insight into a new way to cure the flu. Rosalind has discovered weaknesses in the vast structure of the flu virus that could be destroyed. It's similar to most flu medications sold over the counter. However, this chemical formula contains an unusual motif with a benzene ring. "Great, here it is!" the guy finally cries out, having finished working on the formula. The new drug prevents the action of certain types of proteins found in the flu virus. Whether it is swine flu or seasonal flu, if this drug is administered immediately after infection, it can significantly suppress the growth of the virus. Undoubtedly, this medicine will be widely used in modern medicine. However, there are also problems. This drug needs to be tested before being introduced to the medical community. In the case of stem cells, Ryu could use the company's resources in laboratory. But in this situation, there is no such possibility, so it is necessary to come up with another way. And then Ryu has another epiphany. He decides to contact a company he had worked with before. After clinical trials, it is necessary to register a patent and sell it. At the moment, this is the best solution. So Ryu sets about implementing his plan. Reaction. Chemistry is a place where chemicals are produced through synthetic reactions. They conduct cell testing and do not shy away from animal experiments. It would seem that a solution has been found. But not everything is as simple as it might seem at first glance. Ryu clenches his jaw tensely, trying to resolve the expected obstacle that has arisen. In order to make your plans come true, you need money, a lot of money. Even without taking into account numerous nuances, the patent application itself will cost a lot of money. The guy thinks that he needs to earn some extra money somewhere. His thoughts are interrupted by the sharp ringing of his mobile phone. Surprised by such an unexpected call, the guy reaches out and takes the phone lying on the nightstand. This is Park Joo-hyun. and Ryu has no idea what this funny guy might want from him right now. It turned out that he was simply not far from the biologist's house, so he decided to call and find out how things were. He is concerned about how his friend is living and whether he is eating well. The guys have been friends for about 20 years, and their friendship only gets stronger with each year. So Joo Hyun easily manages to drag his friend out to have dinner together at a small, cozy restaurant. The guy has already graduated from the bar association, and now he is a real certified specialist. While talking with an old friend, Ryu, without even noticing it, relaxes and all the problems fade into the background. A tasty hot meal helps relieve the tension he's been feeling lately, but not completely. Ryu eats so quickly and greedily that it confuses his friend. Joo Hyun can tell from the guy's face that something is clearly wrong. Ryu decides that there is no point in hiding anything from his friend and places the chopsticks back on the table. He takes a deep breath before voicing his request. "Would you by any chance be able to lend me some money?" He finally decides to ask. Park Joo Hyun isn't sure he can help since he just finished his probation period and his salary is still very low. At first, the guy decides that Ryu's card was blocked by the bank. But he replies that everything is not like that at all. Joo Hyun becomes even more nervous at the thought that while he was gone, Ryu took out some kind of loan or borrowed money at interest. Indeed, the guy admits that he has already used the services of such companies in the past. "What a crazy person," Joo Hyun shouts. Ryu says with shame that he borrowed as much as 30 million in microloans. His friend's mouth drops open in shock and he can't speak for the first few seconds. Having overcome the initial shock, he jumps up and loudly asks the amount again for the whole restaurant to hear. Ryu explains that he was in debt to his parents and couldn't cope on his own, so he had to apply for a loan. But now he asks to borrow money not because of these loans, but because he has urgent business. This amazes Joo Hyun even more, because nothing could be more important than paying off debts to loan companies. Ryu replies that it is precisely to pay off all these debts that he is doing what he is asking to borrow for. The friend immediately asks what exactly Ryu is talking about. The biologist looks him straight in the eyes, wondering if he should really trust this man with his secret. Eventually, he admits that he plans to create a new drug, unlike any before it. If he succeeds in creating a good drug, then the money he earns will be enough to buy at least an entire house. Ryu admits that he plans to act alone, without the participation of the Eigen company. Joo Hyun shoots this idea down because there is a law called service invention, which states that even if Ryu succeeds in developing a drug, the company will eventually just take it away. And even if he does this at home in his free time, the court will assume that he was able to invent the medicine thanks to the experience and knowledge acquired while working at Eigen. Therefore, even if he creates an anti-tumor device outside of work, it will still belong to the company. Frustrated, Ryu downs his drink in one gulp. He is trying to create not the above-mentioned device, but a cure for the flu. This surprises Joo Hyun a little. Ryu spends the rest of the evening trying to come up with a way out of the situation, looking for any loopholes in this law. It suggests that if an invention is outside the scope of a company's work, it will not be considered its property. With this assumption, he drives his friend into a dead end and forces him to think carefully. Joo Hyun believes that it would be problematic to view any invention as out of bounds. Moreover, the problem will also concern the financial side of the invention. But Ryu insists on his own, persistently trying to find out his friend's opinion as a professional about such a loophole. The question of whether the invention would then be considered Ryu's property rather than the company's is very difficult to answer. Joo Hyun can't know for sure, because it all depends on the contract that Ryu signed when he was hired. For example, if a company pays an inventor for a patent application, the Supreme Court may recognize the invention as free. Ryu says he is involved in drug research and development at Eigen, and that creating anti-tumor drugs and cancer drugs are two completely different things. At this point, he tries to end the unpleasant conversation and asks his friend to introduce him to a good patent attorney. Joo Hyun, still shocked by the news, still agrees. Despite his doubts, he sent Ryu the money, and the biologist immediately contacted Reaction Chemistry. The final product, which will be ready in about a week after receiving the starting materials, will be sent to the cell biology lab. Sunday arrives, and at exactly 1 p.m., Ryu begins the patent application process. He explains to the girl talking to him that he is developing a new drug only for the flu. The patent attorney's name is Lee Hai-won, and she immediately asks what stage the product's development is at. In response, she hears that the synthesis of medicinal compounds is currently underway. The girl is shocked because this means that the drug has not even been tested yet. Ryu asks if she can even imagine how efficient molecular biological mechanisms are. He would like to register the concept first, and the rest of the details will be added as the process progresses. Lee Hai-won pauses for a moment, thinking about what she heard. She is not sure that the development of this drug can be successful. If there is almost no information, it is difficult to judge the effectiveness of a drug, so she does not understand what this person was thinking when he came to submit an application with absolutely no experimental data. After weighing the pros and cons, Lee Hai-wan suggests one option. If Ryu wants to patent just the idea, then experimental data must be available within a year. Otherwise, he will receive a large fine. The inspired guy promises that all the data will appear within just 1 month, and this amazes the attorney even more. She doesn't understand how this guy can be so confident when the drug is only in the early stages of development. But she still goes to her desk to get the documents needed to submit her application. Only then does Ryu ask about the cost. And she is surprised to hear that such cases have never happened before, so the girl finds it difficult to answer now. Most of the people who come to apply for a patent are directors or their deputies. Due to their age, the level of trust in them is probably a little higher. Lee Hai-wan places all the necessary documents for the patent in front of Ryu and asks him to sign them. The guy is sure that if this project ends successfully, he will come here more than once to formulate new ideas. With these words, he surprises Lee Hai-wan again. Ryu believes that as long as diseases exist, new drugs must be constantly developed. Ju Hyun begins to think that his friend is going crazy, since he is going to invent a cure for all the diseases in the world. Their dialogue is interrupted by the sound of a telephone ringing. On the other side of the line is Dr. Jong Hye-rim from the Life Creation Department, and he really wants to know how Ryu managed to do what he did. The doctor does not understand how Ryu managed to get the embryonic stem cells to start growing in the nutrient medium. That's why on Monday morning, the guy rushes to work like never before. Huddled around a container containing these cells, the biologists chatter among themselves in bewilderment. The fact that they began to grow in the nutrient medium is an indicator of the success of the experiments. Now normal cells turn into embryonic stem cells. This result is so amazing that it is hard to believe. There is only 1 week left until the final seminar. And now they all want as much data and evidence about the experiment as possible. Fortunately, each employee was a professional in his field and clearly carried out the duties assigned to him. And Ryu, sparing no physical strength, was focused on preparing presentation materials. Unnoticed by all the preparations, Friday morning arrives. The annual final seminar of the Agent Company begins. It seems that in every room of the huge building there is not a centimeter of free surface. There are so many people that there is a lack of air. Life Creation Department Director Chung Ji-myung and researcher Bai Seon-mi also returned for the conference from another region where they had been working all this time. While they were gone, the rest of the department staff worked diligently. With a sigh, the department head admits that traveling on such business trips takes up quite a lot of time and effort. He then asks if their presentation is ready for today's performance. To his surprise, senior researcher Park Dong-hyun replies a little nervously that there is a problem. The manager immediately tenses up, already preparing for trouble. The researcher explains that a new employee, Dr. Ryu, recently joined their department, and it was he who single-handedly started one project. It was such a huge breakthrough that the scientists completely forgot about collecting data and slightly underdeveloped their presentation material. In order not to be unfounded, Dong-hyun takes his boss away to clearly show him everything he just talked about. Meanwhile, people continue to arrive at the Agent Company's seminar room. The researchers sit down at their assigned table to discuss everything. Jun Ji-myung asks, a little displeased, why he is only now learning about such outstanding results from his department. This is because scientists have not yet put some of the experimental data in order. So the senior researcher asks the boss to wait until Dr. Ryu arrives and tells him more. The man agrees, mentally ready to take a blow from the company's management. Meanwhile, Kim Hyun-taek comes on stage to greet everyone gathered. Before the annual seminar begins, he gives the floor to the technical director. The staff look at the stage in anticipation, comfortably seated at tables in the hall. Finally, the person they were all waiting for appears in their field of vision. A man approaches the pulpit and greets everyone gathered. His name is Nicholas Kim. He begins his speech by saying that he has personally set himself a goal this year to give up alcohol and cigarettes and start exercising daily. But, unfortunately, he eventually gave up. It's quite hard for Nicholas to admit defeat in this, and many in the room understand and share his feelings. The man goes on to say that at the end of the year he had a medical examination and found that he was in good physical shape. However, he hopes that everyone present will fight to the end to achieve better results. Of course, everyone encounters failures along the way. But you shouldn't give up, because this is all part of science. Isn't the work of researchers like walking in a dark room and trying to find the light by touch? It's okay to make mistakes, says Nicholas. Today, at least 1,000 scientists have gathered in this hall, and if they all unite, then there will not be a single problem that they cannot solve together. This is the purpose of today's seminar. After the welcoming words of the technical director, the chief researcher Kim Joo-yeon came on stage with a presentation, which the girl began by talking about the drug Celicure. However, the name of Ryu Yeonjun, who was the one who introduced this medicine in the past, was never mentioned. The incident, which occurred and was dealt with in a brutal manner, was subtly paraphrased as an appropriate response from management. The Health Products Department knows that the Cancer Drugs Department actually had to collaborate with the Mobile Diagnostic Devices Department. Therefore, they believe that they themselves still have a chance to win the main prize. Kim Joo-yeon continues her presentation and introduces to everyone a new anti-tumor drug developed exclusively by her department. Unlike other drugs, the new medicine was designed to precisely target and destroy stomach cancer cells without affecting healthy human cells. Hearing this, Park Dong-hyun sighs in disappointment. Employees in all other departments also understand that if the presented drug works, it will be a huge breakthrough. When the experimental data was released, everyone was stunned. This presentation was rated as the best in the history of the Agent Company. Even technical director Nicholas was amazed by such success. The next to speak is the Mobile Diagnostic Devices Department, and Dr. Ryu still hasn't arrived, which worries the rest of his department. The representative of the Mobile Diagnostic Devices Department also received positive feedback on his presentation. Next in line was a report from the Medical Equipment Department, and here everything was not so smooth. After the first two presentations, the relentless attack from the managers began. And where can this be used? An awkward question is asked. Do you think this can generate income? Why is the accuracy of this chemical so important? Your delivery method needs to be improved. All these questions and mockery rained down non-stop on all the following departments. The atmosphere in the room, already tense, became worse and worse. Very soon, it will be the turn of the speech and the life creation department. The reports continued. Questions poured in non-stop to all the following departments, turning the speeches into a public execution. Smiles became strained, and the confidence in the speaker's eyes faded like candles in the wind. The faces of the company's leaders expressed a mixture of skepticism, contempt, and hidden glee. All subsequent presentations lost their luster and turned into pathetic attempts to justify themselves. Some speakers had difficulty keeping their voices from shaking, while others avoided looking the audience in the eye. 4 of the 6 departments have completed their presentations. It was the turn of that same health food department with which the life creation department had a conflict in the cafeteria. The whole room is buzzing with tension, no longer knowing what to expect. Choi Myung-jun is invited onto the stage. The man gives a halting presentation and freezes at the edge of the stage, preparing to hear the verdict from the executives. There is one thing I repeat countless times to my junior colleagues. One of the managers starts to speak. The man believes that every scientist should have a streak of business as well. He believes that everyone should strive to create a product that will sell. Choi Myung-jun has unveiled a pumpkin juice project that is unlikely to sell, as well as popular brands in North America and Europe. Do you think it will sell only because of the low-temperature manufacturing technology? The man hears another mocking question. The faces of the people in the hall become increasingly gloomy. Even the quietest whispers die down, and there is almost deathly silence. This is too much, Park Dong-hyun thinks. Is it really possible to humiliate department heads in front of their younger colleagues? Meanwhile, Choi Myung-jun continues to be scolded because sales of probiotics produced by the Agent Company have recently dropped. He faces accusations that his department is unable to keep up with new products from competitors. What on earth have you been doing all this time? Comes an even more humiliating question from Kim Hyun-taek. Choi Myung-jun wearily replies that the department was working on new probiotics, but they are still in the development stage. Apart from this, the department has nothing else. Come down, you've done a good job. They answer him sarcastically, and the man leaves the stage. He slowly walks towards the exit of the hall, his head hanging dejectedly. Finally, it's the turn of the life creation department. Junji Myung walks towards the stage as slowly as possible, trying to stall for time. Out of the corner of his ear, he can already hear whispers coming from the hall. Nobody believes that their department is capable of creating anything worthwhile. Condescending smiles freeze on the faces of the leaders, as if anticipating new entertainment. Junji Myung steps onto the stage and carefully adjusts his microphone. Lightly tapping it with his fingers, the man makes sure that the equipment works. Junji Myung greets the audience politely and begins his presentation. Bae Seon-mi desperately closes her eyes, folding her hands in a prayer gesture. Park Dong-hyun joins in her pleas, mentally begging Dr. Ryu to hurry. At this time, in their department's office, Ryu and Sun Yol are finishing up work. They know they need to hurry. Finally, Ryu is completely ready and has irrefutable proof. Normal cells were successfully initialized into embryonic stem cells, and then they differentiated again into heart muscle cells. Now, instead of waiting forever for a donor organ, it will be possible to create a heart from an oral epithelial cell. To do this, you just need to run a cotton swab along the inside of your cheek. Having received irrefutable evidence, the researchers rush to the required hall as fast as they can. This is a huge step towards what until recently seemed like science fiction. Meanwhile, the 20 minutes allotted for the presentation had expired. Despite the ignorance and ridicule from the executives, Director Chung Ji-myung continued to speak. But in the end, he was still interrupted. "Look, are you sure your presentation is suitable for the final seminar?" Kim Hyun-taek asks rudely. The man continues that he would like to see the research done properly. "You managed to screw up everything?" He starts to get worked up. Kim Hyun-taek asks if Director Jung Ji-myung really thinks that everyone is here today to listen to such nonsense. The man wants to know if the department has any worthwhile results, other than the nonsense that the director just presented. To all this dirt, the director replies that he never considered research a joke, and never did what the technical director said, because he never managed to find light in a dark room. The even more angry manager reminds that Director Ji-myung has been working at the company for 16 years already. "What the hell have you managed to do for our company in these 16 years? He can no longer contain himself and starts shouting. Suddenly, the door opens sharply, and all the attention of the people in the hall switches. No one understands who dared to burst into the hall at such a moment. And only the life creation department smiles happily, seeing who it is. "Sorry I'm late," Dr. Ryu shouts across the room. He had been running so hard that he was out of breath, so Rosalind had already begun to optimize his breathing. Ryu looks at the stage in horror, realizing that the director of his department is there, and that means they're late. The senior researcher jumps up from his seat and rushes to Ryu because he was terribly worried. The man hopes that Dr. Ryu has prepared everything properly and is ready to take the stage. People in the hall whisper among themselves in surprise. Kim Hyun-taek jumps up from his chair indignantly, unhappy that someone dared to make such a mess in the hall. He demands that the representative of the life creation department leave the stage immediately. Ji-myung apologizes for the inconvenience and explains that their department literally just finished the research. He is confident that the research they want to present could not only be a breakthrough in the field of creating life, but could also be the key to opening up the future for the company. Sun Yol asks Dr. Ryu to go up on stage while he prepares the files for his performance. However, Hyun-taek is extremely unhappy with this development. He tries his best to stop Ryu from going up on stage and giving his presentation. People in the hall are tensely awaiting the outcome. Ryu begins to doubt whether he should really go on stage now. Ji-myung realizes that they have failed. "Let's move on to the next part," Hyun-taek announces. But unexpectedly, the technical director Nicholas speaks out in favor of the department. He decides to listen to their idea after all. With his permission, Dr. Ryu steps onto the stage and the images he has selected appear on the screen. "What is this?" Nicholas can't understand. Ryu explains that these are embryonic stem cells, and this is exactly what their department has been working so hard on. This statement makes all the executives burst into loud, mocking laughter. They are convinced that everything this department does is complete nonsense, and even Director Ji-myung himself looks surprised and upset. Despite the ridicule, Ryu continues with his presentation. The Life Sciences Department's project is based on the idea that by creating artificial cells, we can grow artificial organs. By performing a transplant on a patient with severe organ or tissue damage, the injured body part will be completely restored. Now, Ryu wants to present to the management the technology that can be used. It will become an alternative to the labor-intensive and complex process of organ transplantation. Employees from other departments begin to whisper excitedly. Nicholas chuckled thoughtfully, listening attentively to Dr. Ryu. "So, you are researching the technology of creating embryonic stem cells?" Hyun-taek clarifies. It seems to him that everyone in this department has gone crazy. To work on this task, it is necessary to use a fertilized egg, which is very difficult to obtain. If it was obtained illegally, the company could be charged and convicted. "Will you be ready to take responsibility if something happens?" The man continues to swear. To everyone's surprise, Dr. Ryu explains that there was no fertilized egg. Initially, the department's staff took an ordinary cell from the body of the person being examined. They then inserted into it the specific 4 genes shown on the slide and initiated the cell into an embryonic stem cell. This statement leaves all listeners in shock. Even the department director himself cannot believe what he sees on the screen now. There is no doubt that the life creation department has achieved incredible results. If the images provided are to be believed, they really did what Dr. Ryu says. Hyun-taik stares at the presentation slides, his mouth hanging open in surprise. The faces of the audience in the hall showed no less surprise. The stem cell department decides to voice its doubts. "You transformed normal cells into embryonic stem cells and you want us to believe this nonsense?" One of the employees shouts. Dr. Ryu calmly replies that yes, it is possible. The department has all the data on DNA methylation. They also have data on overall gene expression. Hyun-taik is confident that the department cannot have proof that artificial organs can be created from this. However, Ryu claims otherwise, and that is why they are late today. And now the guy asks everyone in the audience to look at the slide that shows cardiac fiber cells. Grows this cell, from which it will be possible to create a heart muscle. That is, this means that in this way it will be possible to create an artificial heart. Because these cells are absolutely identical, embryonic stem cells obtained from a fertilized egg can be differentiated into any cell type. Suddenly, the technical director picks up the microphone. He politely asks Dr. Ryu to tell him more about all this. The rest of the life creation department breathes a sigh of relief, realizing that they were given a chance after all. Ryu nods in agreement and continues his report. If you put these 4 genes into a cell, it will initialize into an embryonic stem cell. Even though it seems impossible, he is confident in his research. Technical Director Nicholas continues to listen attentively to the presentation. Ryu explains that the cell's differential control is complete. Embryonic stem cells are initiated in the same state as a fertilized egg. Hyun-taik listens no less attentively, and beads of sweat roll down his forehead from the tension. Finally, Ryu finishes his presentation. It seems simply unbelievable. The whispers in the room become louder and more emotional. The rest of the life creation department staff smile happily. Each of them is proud of the work they have done. Suddenly, loud claps of hands are heard. This is Nicholas, who even stood up from his chair to show his admiration for the presentation. Ryu didn't expect that this particular person would react like this to their department's achievements. The man continues to clap and Hyun-taik can only gnash his teeth in anger. Nicholas believes that this is literally the technology of the future. This is an evolution in the world of technology, and he had no idea that their company had such excellent researchers like Ryu. Ryu freezes, his mouth slightly open from such praise. As a scientist who studies biology, I would like to express my gratitude to Dr. Ryu Young-jun, Nicholas says loudly. The man does not forget to praise the other employees of this department. Ryu just stands there, unable to say a word. Obeying Nicholas's order, the entire hall begins to applaud wildly. And only Hyun-taik sits sullenly in his place, his hands folded on the table. All the employees of the life creation department are laughing and chatting happily. A faint blush begins to appear on the embarrassed Dr. Ryu's face. After thunderous applause, the presentation stage ended, immediately followed by the award ceremony. During the process of determining superiority, there was a scuffle between the departments. But in the end, the life creation department received the Best Department Award, and Ryu Young-jun received the Innovative Researcher Award in the individual section. The department was awarded $1.5 billion as a prize. Thanks to this project, the entire department gained new strength. Ryu is afraid of not getting the results everyone expects. He couldn't have done all this alone. And if it weren't for Rosaline, none of this would have been possible from the start. The telephone ringtone sounds again. This is a call from the cytology lab. They want to inform you that the results of the experiment have been sent by email. This case concerns flu medicine. Engrossed in a telephone conversation, the guy doesn't notice that he is being listened to attentively. He tries to find out when exactly the results of the study will be ready, and receives the answer that it will be next week. This is because the material is in a state where it can be used immediately. Having heard all the answers he needed, Ryu ends the conversation. With the results of the experiment coming out next week, he will be able to attach them to the patent data immediately. After reviewing the documents, the patent will be registered and everything will be over. He is distracted by a call from behind him. This is So-yeon, who dumped him not long ago. When he looks at this face, he feels the greatest variety of different emotions. Luckily, the guy doesn't feel like he missed her at all. He politely tells the girl that they have nothing to talk about, to which So-yeon replies that she would like to apologize for last time. After they broke up, she felt very bad too. Congratulations on receiving the award, the girl says to Ryu, who is already leaving. She believes that if his business goes well, the guy must definitely make peace with the head of the institute, Kim Hyun-taik. Ryu doesn't want to believe what he hears. Meanwhile, So-yeon continues, promising that she will help him in his research along with the rest of the anti-tumor department staff. The guy closes his eyes, trying to contain the storm of emotions that is overwhelming him. Receiving no response, So-yeon calls out to him again. Coming closer, she grabs the guy by the hand. But to her great surprise, Ryu immediately frees his hand and demands that she not touch him again. Now he doesn't need her help or the help of the senior staff of the anti-tumor department. And more than anything in the world, he doesn't want to think about Kim Hyung-taek. So Yeon doesn't give up. She really regrets breaking up with Ryu, but she also has dreams. If her ex-boyfriend gets into conflict with the director of the research center, she might have problems too. Ryu calmly replies that he didn't want to cause her any trouble, but there's nothing he can do. His colleagues are already waiting for him outside, and he must go to them. Why are you so cold? So Yeon can't understand. Live happily. That's all Ryu answers. Without listening to another word from the girl who betrayed him, he turns around and leaves. The guy goes to a cozy bar with his new colleagues. Today they celebrate an unexpected but much-desired victory. The colleagues laugh loudly, not denying themselves a few glasses of delicious beer. Ji Myung identically raises his glass up, giving a short speech. Ryu smiles happily, finally feeling like he's exactly where he's supposed to be. After some time, Ji Myung quietly calls out to the guy. He wants to talk not as a department head, but as an ordinary researcher. I wish Dr. Ryu would go away, the man says, much to the boy's shock. The biologist asks, upset, what Ji Myung means, to which the man replies that such a capable researcher as Ryu cannot waste his talent here. The rest of his colleagues agree with his opinion. They are sure that once Ryu leaves their department, they will again be treated with disdain, as before. They are all afraid that they will become too attached to Dr. Ryu and won't be able to let him go in the future. Dr. Ryu, do you have a dream? Asks Ji Myung. This makes the guy think a little. A moment later, he replies that he would like to completely overcome at least one disease and thereby save many people. Colleagues think that this is a great dream, as befits a true doctor. But in them, such passion and enthusiasm have long since disappeared. For example, Park Dong-hyun and Bae Sun-mi dream of raising their children well and marrying them off successfully. The woman adds that she believes Dr. Ryu is wasting his time not only in their department, but in Agent's company as a whole. And the guy generally agrees with her. But he doesn't know where else he could go, because there are no other companies in Korea with good equipment and the ability to support research. To which Park Dong-hyun replies that there are many more research opportunities to be found abroad. Ryu laughs and notes that all these foreign companies are not much different from Eigen. Sun-mi agrees with him. The woman already had experience completing an internship at one of these companies. Ji Myung comes up with what he thinks is a good idea. What if Ryu leaves the firm and becomes a professor? After he writes his dissertation on stem cells, he will receive many offers from universities. However, professors cannot create products for the purpose of selling them. Besides, the guy wants to be useful to this world a little more. The director believes that while Dr. Ryu works at Eigen, he only helps the bigwigs at the helm. The guy replies that this will not happen because he will register a patent on stem cell research for himself and for everyone present. This way they can cover the cost of the research and prevent unnecessary pressure. There have been several cases where researchers had a joint patent, but were only able to take a minority stake for themselves. The remaining shares will belong to the company. The director believes that the situation with their department is different from all the others. They have succeeded without any support, and if all goes well, Dr. Ryu will be able to do as he pleases. Sun-mi is not so sure about this, because it is unknown whether the management will agree with this position. Ryu calms them all down, promising to sort out all the details. Ji Myung looks at Dr. Ryu thoughtfully. He gets the feeling that the guy has something else on his mind besides securing an independent budget for their department. Ryu decides to tell it like it really is. In order to make his dream come true, he has already set a goal for himself. The guy wants to achieve the position of CEO of the Eigen company. Such a loud statement shocks everyone present. Ryu intends to become the largest shareholder by stabilizing management rights. Now it sounds like something impossible, but no matter how much the guy thinks, this is the only solution that will help him realize his dream. Companies with good equipment, including those abroad, can be counted on the fingers of one hand. The problem is that in the Eigen company, the operating system is subject to viruses. So the guy is thinking about reinstalling it completely. This idea shocks his colleagues even more. This man is a real genius, Sun Yeol cries out in admiration. Unable to contain his emotions, he rushes towards the guy with hugs. Dong-hyun gets up from his chair and says a few warm words of support to Dr. Ryu. He will always be on this guy's side. Ji Myung touches his chin thoughtfully. He fears that it will be quite difficult to buy so many shares at once, even if he has the necessary amount of money. But Ryu had already thought about that too. He plans to create a subsidiary company that will focus on studying stem cell differentiation. This company will develop and sooner or later absorb Ajin. Ji-Mung notes that it will be quite difficult. Sun Mi, however, is confident that the idea is worth trying. They've all had to endure a lot from the current leadership, so everyone sincerely wishes that Ryu will be able to carry out his plans. In any case, Don Hyun is confident that the people at the top will see the patent documents very soon. And then they will come to their department with bats to sort it out. The other scientists agree with him with loud laughter. Let's drink to the creation of life. Director Jimin finally gives the toast. They sit for quite a long time before going home. But eventually the fun ends and morning comes for Ryu. The guy wakes up from the bright rays of sunlight falling so mercilessly on his face. He can only make a vague moan from a terrible headache. It takes him a long time to finally wake up completely and try to get out of bed. Rosalind informs that she is creating information about the necessary ingredients for restoring the body. The guy decides to first take care of his body, as the artificial cell advises him. Besides, it wouldn't hurt him to rest after such hard work. Many things appeared that had never bothered him before. On the same day, he was paid the prize money for the prize he won, which amounted to 100 million won. Although this is a fairly large amount, it is not enough to pay off the debt on the house and pay for the resolution of his affairs. However, the guy will be able to catch his breath at least for a little while. Now he needs to send some money to his family and give back the money he borrowed to Ju Hyuk. Lying on the bed, the guy thinks about the future. If his flu medicine sells well, he won't have any financial problems. So now is the time to start using your money as efficiently as possible. Ryu decides to invest money in developing new drugs. If he can increase the number of drug patents registered in his name, he will become a significant figure in the agent company. This is the most reliable way, but there are problems with physical strength. The guy currently has a low body impulse level, and to fix this, Rosalind recommends jogging for 3 hours. The reward for this effort will be a physical strength of 0.5. The guy jumps out of bed in surprise. He is terribly lazy to spend 3 hours running. But nevertheless, the young man will have to do this, because all the time he is only in the laboratory, which means that his body is most likely already almost wooden. It takes a little sweat, Ryu decides. Yawning loudly, he stretches and heads outside. It is now the height of the day. The streets are filled with a large number of city dwellers strolling. Breathing heavily, Ryu runs down one of the city streets. Beads of sweat are running down his face, and the guy himself can't even out his ragged breathing. The artificial cell notices this and helps the guy by optimizing his breathing process. Rosalind had done something similar when he ran from the lab to the seminar room. Thanks to her, the guy's life became much easier. Pleased with Rosalind's help, Ryu decides to speed up and run even harder. Sparing no more effort, he rushes forward. The sun beat down mercilessly like a hot frying pan, turning running into a painful ordeal. Every breath burned the lungs with dry, hot air, and sweat, like a sticky film, covered the body, preventing movement. The guy stopped to catch his breath and suddenly noticed a girl he already knew nearby. This is the pharmacist from the drugstore where he recently embarrassed himself so much. The girl in ordinary clothes looks completely different, so Ryu didn't recognize her right away. Having made up his mind, he nevertheless approaches her. "Hello," Ryu says, moving closer to the girl petting her dog. She looks up and looks at the stranger with bewilderment. But a second later, recognition flashes in her eyes, and she remembers that in front of her is the same guy who bought probiotics. Finally, they get to know each other normally, laughing and telling each other their names. Ji-Hyun praises Ryu for working out so hard, and the boy becomes embarrassed. At this time, the girl's dog looks at the new person with interest. Ryu leans towards him, wanting to take a closer look. He doesn't know much about breeds, but it looks like he's looking at a golden retriever. The girl confirms his riddle and says that the dog's name is Brownie. This dog has a wonderful character. The girl constantly walks him, and therefore he behaves very quietly at home. Ryu asks, a little surprised if everything is okay, because he noticed traces of vomit on the dog's fur. Jin-Hyun excitedly says that Brownie suddenly started vomiting and feeling weak, so they went outside to find the nearest veterinary clinic. While Ryu examines the dog, Rosalind begins the synchronization process. "Want to know more about parvovirus?" asks the artificial cell, demanding 0.04 physical force per second in return. Ryu recalls hearing about the virus when he was a student giving lectures on virology. The guy is trying hard to remember at least something, but to his regret, nothing comes of it. So first he decides to activate the synchronization mode. With Rosalind's help, he carefully examines Brownie. noticing any oddities. With horror, he realizes that this is not ordinary vomiting at all. It's too dangerous to leave Brownie here like this. We need to rescue the dog immediately. In front of the astonished girl's eyes, Ryu picks up the dog in his arms. He surprises and frightens Jin-hyun even more when he insistently asks her to open the pharmacy right now. Together, they run as fast as they can towards the pharmacy building. With Rosalind's help, the boys saw that the spherical material was already near the icosahedron, and the odoltodol receptors were rapidly rising to the surface. This reduces the number of white blood cells, causing vomiting and dehydration. There are only about 6 hours left to save Brownie. When they get to the drugstore, the guy puts the dog down on the floor and a worried Ji-hyun sits down next to him. Ryu tries to calm the girl down while looking at the medicines available in the pharmacy. He picks up each of the jars or tubes that he thinks might be suitable. And finally, his search is crowned with success. Clutching one of the packages tightly in his hand, the guy reads the ingredients. This is exactly what he was looking for: hydrocortisone acetate. This substance, equivalent to hormones secreted by the adrenal glands, is a powerful anti-inflammatory agent. Although no one in the world knows about this fact yet, this medicine is effective in suppressing parvovirus. Ryu asks to hold the dog and opens the tube of medicine. He quickly approaches the dog and opens its mouth with one hand. The exhausted dog does not resist at all when Ryu squeezes the medicine onto his tongue. Ji-hyun notices that it is an ointment meant for external use and is horrified. Ryu confirms that this is indeed the case. The pharmacist decides that he is crazy because he knew about this perfectly well and still gave the medicine to the dog. She rushes to the pharmacy shelves in a panic, trying to find something. Finally, having found the right jar, the girl grabs it and returns to the dog. At this time, Ryu carefully observes the dog's reaction to the drug. The dog looks happy and full of strength and energy. The guy smiles happily when he realizes that he did everything right and now Brownie will live. At this time, Ji-hyun runs towards them, clutching a glass with some liquid in his hand. Ryu realizes that it is hydrogen peroxide to make the dog vomit. He tries to stop the girl from giving the liquid to the dog, but she continues to argue. So Ryu interrupts her indignation and asks her to look closely at the dog. The still agitated girl does not immediately understand what he is talking about. But he still looks at Brownie and sees that the dog is absolutely healthy. But how? Ji-hyun cries out in shock. The guy replies that this is only a temporary measure, since Brownie most likely has parvovirus infection and needs to be taken to the vet immediately. The girl can't understand how he found out about this virus and why he gave the dog this particular ointment. Ryu can't tell her the truth. So he says that he recently noticed data about diseases that animals are susceptible to among the inside information. The dog's safety is of the utmost importance now, so they must go to the veterinary hospital immediately, and the young man suggests continuing this conversation later. The situation was very dangerous, so he had to act so quickly. The girl sheepishly apologizes for her excessive emotionality and screaming, but Ryu replies that everything is fine. He asks the girl to go to the veterinary clinic anyway, and he himself is going to go home since he only went out for a run. The guy is already turning to leave when Ji-hyun calls out to him. "Wait!" the girl screams. Ryu turns around, confused. A little embarrassed, Ji-hyun comes closer to him. The girl holds her bright red phone in her hand and hesitates before saying anything. Blushing, Ji-hyun thanks Ryu for saving his dog and asks for his number. The girl intends to treat him to dinner as a thank you, and Ryu opens his mouth in surprise from shock. Having resolved all the issues with Ji-hyun, he thoughtfully heads back home. It turns out that Rosalind can even heal animals. It dawns on Ryu that they need to try to develop a new medicine for animals. Thanks to Brownie and Ji-hyun, he came up with such a great idea. Unlike developing drugs for humans, clinical trials are not required when developing drugs for animals. Perhaps in the future, he will be able to develop medicines for animals because the interest in pets among people is growing more and more. The cost of the drugs he develops in the future will rise, which means he will be able to receive credit he could never have dreamed of. Having reached home, the guy immediately calls his attorney. He apologizes for being so late, but he has a very important question. The girl had just finished filling out the application documents and sent everything by email. Lee Hai-won reminds that Ryu will have to provide the results of the experimental data within 1 year, to which the young man replies that the results will be ready within 3 months. The girl is even more surprised when Ryu says that he wants to submit another application. This time, Ryu wants to patent medicines for pets. As if sensing something was wrong, Hai-won asks how many requests exactly he wants to make. The biologist replies that he plans to patent 122 new drugs that will help in the treatment of 34 different diseases. The shocked girl leans on the nearest table to keep from falling from shock. From now on, Ryu will send her one request every day. The guy continues to say that if he can negotiate for help, then the results of the experimental data will also be ready within 3 months. He immediately clarifies how much the attorney's services will cost. Even if he has to spend all the money, he is ready to do it. Hyewan promises to do her best, and they end the conversation. What's going on? She asks herself. On Monday morning, the 6th Scientific Research Institute receives some unpleasant news. 2 men look closely at a small stack of documents. Gil Hyunjun's office is a real mess. What kind of crazy bastard is this? The man screams. He had just learned that Ryu Youngjun had taken 10% of the company's shares for himself. This infuriates the man and he throws papers at his employee. In addition to the shares, Ryu also took 80% of the entire budget for the department's needs. Is our company a place for entertainment for him? Hyunjun continues to shout furiously. He only found out about this whole situation because he was called onto the carpet. The man demands that the employee call this Ryu Youngjun immediately. But even before the scientist presses the call, he changes his mind. At the last second, he cancels his order and decides not to call. The man is going to think a little more before doing anything. Now, this guy is the star of all the research institutes combined, and even the technical director simply adores him. This means that Ryu cannot be eliminated so easily. But the man also cannot skip this patent application. Eventually, he comes up with a brilliant idea. He remembers that there is only one person who can stand up to Nicholas, and this is Ji Kwan Man, the general manager of the management department from the main company, Eigen. He always puts profit first and reacts very quickly to what is happening. This person will not hesitate and will immediately express a negative opinion, even if Nicholas supports Dr. Ru. That's why Hyunjun gives the order to send these documents to him. The man remains sitting thoughtfully in his office. If Nicholas continues to support Ryu Youngjun, a clash between the two sides is inevitable, and this thought gives him great joy. The very next day, because of these documents, events begin to develop rapidly. Yoon Bo-hyun, the department chief of the management department, heads to the life creation department. The department was expecting the director of the institute, Kil Hyun-jun, but it looked like he wouldn't come. Instead, an employee of the main company visited the scientists. He called Ryu for a private conversation. Bo-hyun heard that Ryu was absolutely brilliant at the seminar and that everyone was talking about him. Dr. Ryu responds to these words that he went a bit overboard then. The head of the department says that he does not understand how such a smart person could make such a stupid mistake in the document. He especially doesn't understand how Ryu was able to get ahead of the bets and the list of people who were supposed to receive these same bets. The guy replies that there is no mistake in the document. According to this list, 1% of the funding goes to the main company, 80% to the life creation division itself, and the rest goes to Dr. Ryu and the other people on his team. Do you even realize how much money that is? Bo-hyun asks, and Ryu closes his eyes tiredly. He replies that he put his name as the sole manager of the funds because he wanted to prevent other people from using the money. The research results that he claims in the patent are the result of his brain work, which means he can lay claim to this money. Bo-hyun thinks this guy is crazy for believing that all of this is his property and not the company's. Ryu continues to say that he does not plan to use the money for personal needs, but is going to spend it on research and in accordance with the company's rules. And Ryu could never put a person who was not participating in the study first on the list just because he was his boss. Bo-hyun realizes that this guy is very stubborn. He informs that if they cannot resolve this issue today, then tomorrow Ryu will most likely be called to the main office. He hoped to scare the scientist with this, but to the man's bewilderment, Ryu only asked to be informed of the results. Bo-hyun is unpleasantly surprised. He slams the folder of documents shut with a loud sound. They are not going to listen to him here, so the man is getting ready to leave. Finally, he tells Dr. Ryu that his department only began to get back on track after the report, and such actions will only upset the people at the top. He is sure that the guy will have a hard time like never before. Ryu replies that he is not afraid of such threats and asks to approve his patent application anyway. Obviously, the scientist is not going to give up. "It was nice to see you," he says to an even more shocked Bo-hyun. Now he needs to go to work, so the guy heads for the exit. 2 days later, at Aigen's main office. As expected, Ryu is still called to the mat to try to apply pressure again. The guy enters the office of Ji Kwan Man, the very same manager of the management department. "Dr. Ryu, what do you want?" the man asks. The question is what Ryu will do after he patents his drug. Kwan Man's face expresses extreme dissatisfaction with the young scientist's behavior. Ryu replies that he plans to continue his research on stem cells. He intends to develop the most effective medicine possible. Technical Director Nicholas asks to fulfill all of Dr. Ryu's requests as much as possible. But Kwanman believes that this is simply interference in the company's management policy, so he asks the guy to do his job as a research assistant and leave all financial matters to the management. Okay, Ryu agrees unexpectedly easily. He suggests that we assume that he never applied for a patent. Then he will leave the institute and go to America. There, Ryu will go to work for some research company, starting research from scratch, and there, he will receive a patent. Kwanman is confident that according to the regulations on employee research and development, this patent belongs to the company, which any court will confirm. Ryu doesn't think so at all. His job description is to create life, not to research stem cells. This means he has every chance of winning in court. He is confident that any company abroad will want to collaborate with him on this research topic. And then Agen will be involved in a lawsuit for an international patent and time will pass. Besides, it's unlikely that there's anyone else who can continue to conduct this research after Ryu leaves. Kwanman grits his teeth in anger as he listens to all of Dr. Ryu's arguments and realizes that he is indeed right.